Okay. Now are we here? Okay, we're back. We are back. What a mess. All right, anyone who was watching, sorry, stream got scuffed there for a minute, but we're back. We will continue on where we left off.
Founding fathers didn't give everybody the right to vote from the beginning.
I mean, the founding fathers also endorsed and owned slaves. Do you agree with chattel slavery?
Hold on, just let her finish. Go ahead.
I mean, the founding fathers also endorsed and owned slaves.
Just let her finish.
But
do you believe in chattel slavery?
Yeah. So you do realize that they could do bad thing, right? I can agree that's bad thing, but that has nothing relationally to do with how they set up the system of government.
I mean,
yeah, but you kind of just didn't appeal to authority. We should do this because the founding fathers wanted it that way. So I don't know what his point was there.
I thought this was going to be a debate on feminism. Honestly, I think that's kind of wild because it sounds like you're disenfranchising men. So who do you think would be? Are you trying to go back?
I'm not.
You are. You're taking away.
I'm not disenfranchising men. Calm down. I'll explain.
But if you're taking away the votes of a man because he is not, I guess, landowning, is that what's the criteria for having a vote?
I think ultimately more men would be voting because they would have more stake.
So can I ask, can every man go to prison?
Yeah.
Okay. If they commit a crime, they can go to prison?
Yeah.
Everyone can do that?
Yes.
Okay. And everyone is in this country has to abide by the laws of this country, otherwise they will go to prison, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so why wouldn't they be allowed to vote on the representatives that define those laws? If that is a stake. If you can go to prison for committing...
Kind of, but this doesn't logically follow all the way to the end because like people who are here on vacation can go to prison, but they don't get to vote. So like just being able to go to prison in a country, I get what she's saying. You're like integrated into the system. You're always going to be subject to the laws and regulations of that system. I think just saying that you could go to prison part is it's a little maybe it's reductive, I'm not sure. But the answer should be it's that full system integration. So it's not just like if you break the law, you go to jail. There's like all kinds of regulations and stuff that apply to you that wouldn't apply to someone who's here on vacation necessarily. So I get what she's saying. I think she should reformulate it another way.
Committing a crime that is created by the government, then you do have a stake legislatively in the laws that the government creates.
That still wouldn't follow that you would need to vote.
Yes, you would need to vote.
Why?
You want to vote for the representatives that create laws that are just and fair to you.
Yeah, why? Like you could have
because you could go to prison.
Okay,
that's a huge stake.
I'll show you, right? Can kings put you in prison?
Yeah.
Can kings also pass just laws?
Sometimes, maybe.
Okay, so
maybe not.
if kings pass just laws, why do you need to vote?
Well, why did we fight an entire
answer
revolution?
the question before you ask another one. I just answered all of yours. If a king passes just laws, why?
Well, we vote because the alternative is when people didn't like the laws kings made, they did revolutions. Instead, we vote. So like that's the argument for voting is instead of revolutions. That's like the main argument for democracy as opposed to monarchy.
Why would you need to vote?
Because a king can also pass unjust laws.
So can legislatures.
Sure, but if you have a stake in that and if you're able to represent for your legislator, you can vote a legislator out.
Yeah, but you can also rebel against kings. So like that's what I'm saying. Your position doesn't follow. It doesn't actually follow for you to say.
Well, no, it does follow. She's not saying the whole position though. It does follow because we don't want rebellion in the country. We would rather people vote instead of revolution.
That because you can be imprisoned inside of a nation that somehow gives you the right to vote.
Well, because you have a stake. You're saying that.
Hang on. I'm
people
falsifying
don't
your
have a
claim.
stake
I'm falsifying your claim. If you claim kings can make just laws, right?
Yes.
Then I don't understand. Why would people need to vote when kings are making just laws?
Well, then why would
Pt2, I knew the left was lying about Trump when they called him a racist, but didn't say one word about Joe's extremely racist 60 years in government. Interesting. We are watching a debate about feminism right now, though. I don't know. I don't think Joe got brought up yet, but cool.
would we leave the monarchy of England? If kings can make just laws, why would we leave?
Well, in that case, you had a nation apart that had a rebellion against the king.
Yes,
that's what was going on. But kings have been rebelled against historically under certain circumstances many times.
So you'd like to go back to feudalism? Like
No,
you
it's not
don't believe in
feudalism.
democracy? Well, yeah, that is
No,
the
it would be
feudalism is under a monarchy.
It would be called limited democracy, which is exactly what we had here. Do you think we had feudalism because most people couldn't vote here?
We had limited democracy, and then there were like many uprisings against that limited democracy because everyone deserves.
Uprising is kind of a strong word. There were movements. There was really only one uprising, civil war. There haven't really been any other large-scale revolutions within the United States, violent ones at least. That's how what I would consider an uprising. I wouldn't consider like protesting. So like the civil rights movement, I wouldn't really consider that an uprising. The other movements we've had along the years, sort of tangential to civil rights, I wouldn't really consider those uprisings. We've had several movements, though. That's true.
There wasn't uprisings really against that. The only uprising that I'm aware of in American history against America was the Civil War.
The Civil War, the Civil Rights movement.
But that wasn't about
the first
voting.
Feminist movement,
That wasn't
the second
about
feminist
voting.
Movement, the Civil Rights movement.
No. The
All of
Civil
those were
War
about-
wasn't about voting.
Well, I mean, it was about the owning of chattel slaves.
So not about voting then?
Which is also about human and civil rights.
But not about voting though.
But voting is a civil right.
I don't know. I'm not sure that I believe in this.
It's about freedom and it's about representation.
Yeah. So
the point is representation.
So let's back up.
That's what voting is. Voting is representation and democracy.
I understand, but you haven't actually made the positive case for why people need to be able to vote.
People need to be able to vote because they have a stake in the legislation of this country. If you can be imprisoned at this country, if you can be robbed of your bodily autonomy by the legislators of this country, then you should be able to have a stake in what the laws that those legislators are making.
Well, let's see if this makes sense. Do you agree with me that individual voters don't actually have very much power at all?
Individual voters, no, but that's the point of a collective voting body.
I'm with you. So individuals already don't really have very much power just because they can vote, right?
Sure.
So isn't it the case actually that what you're advocating for is political tribalism? Because you don't have individual power as a voter, you actually have to tribalize with other voters in order to have any sort of collective power, right?
Well, you're taking away power from all the voters, so it wouldn't even be
answer my question, please? Tribalism, the idea that you, as the individual, do not have power, right?
Yes.
You do have to collectivize with other people, right?
Okay, but how is taking away
a vote? Yes or no?
No.
Yeah. Okay. No.
But
okay.
here's my question: how is taking away more people's votes disincentivizing political tribalism?
Yes.
Because now I have to band with someone. Because now I have to band with someone who has a vote. I don't even get a stake. So you're saying because people don't have enough power to vote, I'm going to take what little power they do have.
You're not answering my question, though.
It just doesn't make sense structurally.
Yeah, I know, but you got to answer my question.
It just doesn't sound like you believe in
It sounds
democracy.
like you need to answer my question, though.
It sounds like your question is meant to trap me because your argument
Can you
is
just
riddled with
answer the
logical
question,
fallacies.
please? What's fallacious about my argument?
You're saying
I've already pointed out several of them, but one that immediately comes to mind just off what he was just saying, limiting the number of voters would not change the fact that they could be influenced by NGOs or lobbyists. But I mean, that doesn't change that at all. So that's one. And then there were a few more before.
Saying that people do not have a stake in this country, therefore they do not have a right to vote.
It's not what I said.
Yes,
What
it
you're doing
is.
is a straw man fallacy.
Can we go back to
Yeah,
what
you
he
can
said?
go. You can go
Let's-
back.
can
What
we
I
go
said
back
to you
that?
specifically is what you're saying doesn't logically follow. And when I'm talking about political tribalism, do you agree with me that you do, if you need to have collectives to have actual political power, are you not promoting political tribalism?
If you need to have but that's how voting works. It's about a majority.
So then you are
Yes.
promoting collective political tribalism, right?
So voting and then the will of the majority is essentially political tribalism, is what you're saying?
Well, it's not really the will of the majority.
It is the will
Here's
of
what
the majority.
happens. No, not really.
Do you understand how voting works?
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay, well then tell me how it's the will of the majority when a California legislator gets elected.
Well, everyone who would like to vote can vote, and then whoever
What
gets
about
the most
what about the
votes
people in Georgia?
wins. Well, why would a person in Georgia get to vote on a
So
legislator
it's not
for a
really the
California state
collective, it's
legislator?
the tribe, right?
But then Georgians get to vote for their
Right,
state
so it's a
legislator.
tribe then?
And then all of those legislators come together
So it's a
to
tribe.
create laws.
So it's a tribe?
It's not a tribe, but it,
Well,
Whether or not it's tribalism is wholly and entirely irrelevant. Where is he going with this?
those are called states.
yeah,
That's what
states are voting for their own interests, right?
But states will vote for the governors.
Yeah.
Why would I get to vote
What-
for the
what-
governor?
Wait,
Hold on, pause.
Hold on. Let her
Listen to
finish.
me. Why would I get to vote for the governor of, let's say, Tennessee, if I
Right.
don't live in Tennessee?
Makes sense.
Okay.
So it's almost
So
like
then
like
why
these
would-
individual states, right? They vote along tribal lines for that state's particular interests, right?
Yes, and
They're
then
not
each state has a representative
Right,
in
which
the
they send?
collective government.
sure in the federal government, right? You're
Uh-huh.
talking about in our Senate and in our Congress, right?
Yes.
Great. So let's start with this. If it is the case that you have California and Nevada, these are two states which are next to each other, you agree,
Sure.
right?
Yes.
Can these states vote against each other's interests when it
Of
comes
course
to
they can.
resources?
In the federal government, yes. they
No,
can.
even at the state level they can, right?
Why would they be able to at the state level? I can't vote for the Nevada governor. I can't vote for
Because perhaps there's something
Nevada
that perhaps Nevada has some type of, I don't know, assessed tax or something like this that they're able to collect, which disproportionately affects Californians in some way. They can do that, right?
What law is that?
Whatever it would be, they
So
can
does
do
it exist or does it, not exist?
Can they do that? Can they do that is my question.
Can Nevada legislate against California?
No, they're not legislating against. Listen to my question. Actually, I want you to repeat my question so I know you actually heard it.
I'm sorry, I'm not a dog. I
Can
don't
you repeat
things.
it? Well, it's
No.
called steel manning a
Just
position.
say the question. then.
Okay. Can states vote against other states?
I love how she's just absolutely refusing to play the little like debate bro shenanigans that Andrew does. I really like it. Like, no, if you want me to answer something I'm not answering, ask the question again.
States' interests simply by having a neighboring state, right? Let's just say, for instance, that you were to have like, oh, I don't know, trucks which went between Nevada and California, right?
Yes.
And California took advantage of this by raising taxes on gasoline, but only on the border areas where these goods came in. This disproportionately hurts Nevada truckers for some reason, right? They can do that, right?
Yes, they can do that.
Okay, great. So in California, if that was beneficial to Californians, they would basically be voting for their tribe against Nevada, right?
But is that happening?
It
or
does
are you
happen.
just trying to use a hypothetical?
No, there's tons and tons of instances where different states do various things, even asking for federal money in overages compared to other states for different problems. Same thing with disaster support. They definitely are all trying to support their tribe, right?
Okay, so because states can potentially, hypothetically, vote against another state's interest, men and women should not have the right to
No,
vote.
that's not the conclusion.
But that was your argument.
No,
the
that's-
privilege is
no, we're-
you
again, do
stated
you know what a
no voting,
descriptor
both
is?
Sexes,
What's a
one marriage voting system.
Why don't you understand the difference between a descriptor and prescriptor? What did I prescribe?
What you prescribed is one voting system. Is a voting
Yes.
system in which
What
both
I'm
men
doing-
and women are disenfranchised.
Yeah, what I'm doing right now is I'm giving you descriptors so we can determine if it's tribalism or not, because you said it's not tribalism to have collectivism in voting blocks, which is insane.
But what you haven't been able to answer is why disenfranchising more voters is somehow
Well, let me-
solving
Hold on,
political
Hold on, just
tribalism.
let her get to the end
All
of the
right.
sentence, please.
Well,
Go
let me
ahead.
explain it
Sure.
the best way that I possibly can.
I hope
Your
you try.
worldview promotes political tribalism. So what happens is this: NGOs can go to our government and they can bribe them for voting blocks, and that's exactly what they do. Non-government organizations do this, and lobbyists do this.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they raid the treasury from people like you and me so that they can bribe certain portions of the electorate in order to incentivize them to collectivize.
Okay.
That's why black people often vote as a monolith, for instance. They vote monolithically, up to 80-90% together, especially in national elections, because they're made certain promises out of the treasury from the electorate, usually at the expense of other forms of voters. This is 100% tribalism.
So how are NGOs bribing politicians, influencing who black people as individuals choose to vote for?
How do NGOs do that?
I just don't understand how you're saying. I mean, I agree that NGOs should not be bribing and lobbyists shouldn't be bribing, but instead of
That's
saying,
what they do, though, right?
Okay, but we're trying to get back to your claim that
I'm in
less
the middle of
people
my
should
claim.
vote. Okay, well, I'm responding because this is a conversation.
Yeah.
Sure. So we're trying to get back to your claim that less people from both sexes should be able to vote.
Yeah, no, that's not where we just were.
But that's your initial claim,
Yeah, but
yes?
now you're just pivoting. Where we just were was.
Well, you're not letting me
you
finish
said,
my sentence.
No,
if you'd let
because
me finish my sentence,
you're
we could go back.
pivoting. We're talking right now about whether tribalism is descriptively true in your voting system.
I understand that, but we're trying to get back to your initial claim.
It would be descriptively true in yours too, Andrew. I don't. This part of the conversation seems kind of pointless.
Because you have
Yeah.
a very important claim to defend. You're trying to
I
take
am
votes away
defending
from
it.
the American people
Yeah.
poorly, but let's get into
okay.
it. So NGOs bribe, lobbyists bribe,
Yeah.
and that is impacting who and what politicians are promoting. I would agree with that statement. Would you agree with that statement?
Well, not just what they're promoting, but also they are setting the precedent for laws themselves.
Okay, yeah.
So
sure.
they actually, I would even argue back that NGOs and private think groups write the laws in which politicians most often execute, and so do bankers as well.
I agree with that. So why would taking away votes from the average American and singular citizen prevent NGOs and lobbyists from having an ability to impact and predict and create laws?
Yeah, so if you move to stakeholder democracy, this idea that you had to have some sort of public service or something like this, it actually collectivizes down the voting pool, which adds responsibility to the voters who can then be held accountable, which right now voters can't be. That's why it's so important. So you're
Voters
saying,
can be held accountable.
So you're saying how?
Well, legislators will create laws that hold those voters accountable. We're
How?
the ones who have to follow them. Do you not have
How
to
are
follow
they?
the
Well,
laws?
that's not you being held accountable.
It is being held accountable.
No. So right now, under tribalism, you can get laws passed which affect me, but benefit you. I can't go hold you somehow accountable for that.
But that's how a majority voting works. That's how democracy
I know,
works.
which is why I want limited democracy where we can actually hold people
because
accountable.
you just want to be in charge.
So, Andrew, you want to be able to hold individual voters accountable, to the populace, if they're the people that have been selected to vote through whatever convoluted means you've decided? Dude. This just doesn't make any sense, because the two arguments he put forward don't actually land in a place where we just only would have more intelligent and informed voters. It would just be whoever fits the random criteria, neither of which are indicators of a particular intelligence or informedness.
How would I be in charge if it's stakeholder democracy?
Well, you said one marriage voting system.
That could be one way of doing it, yes.
Okay, what are the other ways of doing that?
Another
But anyone can get married. So why would they necessarily be informed on voting?
good way would be public service.
So
Anyone can do public service. It just doesn't make any sense. If you want more informed and intelligent voters, this just doesn't make any sense.
whoever
Perhaps
does
up
a
to
public service.
Perhaps up to 3 to 5 years unpaid, or
Are you-
military service would be good.
So during this public service in which people are working 3 to 5 years unpaid, how are they paying for food and groceries and housing?
Yeah, so the state would take care of that, just like they do in the military.
The state would take care of that like they do in the military. And how do you plan on getting that passed?
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, because
Let's
are
say
you
I
not
could
trying
never
to
get it
create-
passed. We're arguing the ideology of this system. What does that have to do
Well,
with anything?
What's the point in creating an ideology that will never work in
How are you going to get
practice?
Marxism passed?
You're not.
So
That's why it's
aren't
a
you a
bad
Marxist?
idea.
But you're a Marxist, right?
How did you know that?
Well, I don't
Who
know.
told you
That's what
that?
your videos seem to imply, that you believe in
Did
Marxist
I ever
feminism.
say that I was in Marxist?
Oh, I don't know. Are you a socialist?
On a certain level.
Okay,
somewhat.
how are you going to get socialist? Like, that's silly. That us making the comparison contrast.
I don't really know if there's like certain levels of socialism. Because the like furthest you can go where it's still capitalism is like there are co-ops and things like that, but all of these can just exist under capitalism, unless she means like social democracy, which is sort of just like the regular liberal position. Just sort of like the standard neoliberal-ish Democratic Party position of just having social safety nets and whatnot. I'm not really sure what she means by that. Because once you hit socialism, it's workers own the means of production, and that's like the whole system is different. There's not like that's like a very solid line you have to cross.
Between like socialism, capitalism
But it's nice to hear she's not a Marxist, because that's nonsense.
has no bearing on whether or not I could somehow get this passed or have some plan to get it passed.
Okay.
I'm arguing about the ideology here.
Do you want to understand my belief or do you just want to guess?
Well, hang on. What does that have to? Do you know what I just said, though?
Well, I mean, you just called me a Marxist.
Do you
just called me
agree?
a socialist.
Well,
but
if
you
you're not a
didn't even know what I
Marxist,
believed.
that we're doing a comparison contrast of worldviews and ideology. If we're doing contrast worldview and ideology, it's a non sequitur to ask me, well, how are you going to get it passed? What does that have to do with anything?
Well, why would you create a worldview that fundamentally cannot work in practice? That
Well,
sounds
it's
like
not
a
a
waste of time.
worldview that fundamentally cannot work in practice.
you couldn't
even
say
if
how
I
it works in
could,
practice.
even if I couldn't prescriptively tell you, like the next political chain of things we do to get there has nothing to do with whether or not the worldview in practice would work.
Well, do you have any practical guesses for how we could apply this to a modern day society?
Well, I just just told you how we would apply it. You would have stakeholder democracy.
Okay, so that's just so one day we're just going to flip a switch and have that. Like, I don't understand.
No, what do you mean? Okay, you could have an amendment for it. You could repeal the 19th Amendment. You could.
So you want to repeal the right to vote?
Or just replace it. It wouldn't be. What I'm talking about is universal suffrage. You keep on making a conflation in terms. You think that because I say universal suffrage, that means no suffrage. I'm talking about limited suffrage.
So who gets to decide who gets the right to vote?
Didn't I literally just tell you who gets to decide who gets to vote?
Okay, so
No, you didn't. She asked who gets to decide who gets to vote. And you answered just who you think gets to vote. Those are different questions. She shouldn't have let that slide. I feel like she's letting that slide.
everyone who participates in this public service gets the right to vote.
That could be one way to do it, yes.
Okay. And that anyone could do that. If you wanted to?
Yeah, people could do it if they're willing to give up X amount of years of their lives for unpaid service so that they could then vote.
But it's not unpaid service because the government would be paying for their food and their housing.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be getting anything additional to that.
Okay, well, why not just have civil servants who are already
Because civil servants have specific jobs to do, like, working at the DMV and stuff like that, and working in the Social Security office.
So you're basically saying anyone who does community service should get the right to vote?
No, some sort of civil occupational service under the state. That could be like civil firefighting work, maybe. It could be civil paramedic work. It could be there's all sorts of different things you can look at for stakeholder democracy. When we've seen it applied around the world, it's been somewhat successful.
And do the laws apply to everyone in the society or just the people who choose to participate in this democracy?
Yeah, they still apply to everyone, yeah.
Okay. So how can you create and apply a law to people who are not represented? I just don't understand. Morally, how do you justify
There's nothing immoral about it.
There's nothing immoral about
No.
I mean, but that's
Like,
kind of
I
like
would say it's
consent.
more immoral. Why is it moral for an 18-year-old to nullify the vote of a 41-year-old if the 18-year-old doesn't even know what they're voting for? How's that moral?
Well, because the 18-year-old is still subject to the laws of the state.
Yeah, but they don't
If an
even know
18-year-old
what they're voting for.
Can an 18-year-old go to jail for 20 years?
A 16-year-old can. Should they be able to vote?
16-year-olds can't go to jail.
Yes, they can. 16-year-olds can go to jail for life. Should they be able to vote?
I mean, no, but why?
Well, why
would they be
not?
going
Why
to
not?
jail
The
for-
laws apply to them, though.
Why would a 16-year-old be going?
Hang
to
on,
jail
I don't
for
understand.
life,
Because he murdered someone.
though? Okay, that's fair. I mean, if you
Yeah.
murder someone, that's a whole.
So I don't understand. Why can't he vote? The laws apply to him. Why can't he vote?
Yeah, but we all understand that.
No, we all understand it's not an argument. Why does a 16-year-old get to vote even though all
It's possible, but the specific words she said were, "Who gets to decide who gets to vote?" I don't know. Maybe she misworded it. Maybe he misheard it. I don't know. She seems to have just brushed past it and gone on to something else regardless. So
the laws apply to the 16-year-old, why does he get to vote?
Not all the laws apply. They start in juvenile detention, and then at 18, they get the right to go.
So laws apply to 16-year-olds?
But you're retried at 18.
So
like when
laws
you start
apply
at
to
16,
16-year-olds?
Some laws, of course.
Okay,
yes.
great. Why can't they vote then?
So babies should get the right to vote?
That's
I mean,
my
they're a
question
minor.
to you. That makes no sense. Exactly. So why do we limit it to 18?
Well, that's the age that we've defined as being a legal adult. That's the age that we as a country have universally agreed with our right to vote is.
Yeah, but what
the
makes
age of
that a
legal
good
adult.
idea? Just
That's
because
the
you
age of
arbitrarily.
consent. That's the age
Yeah,
of-
but just because you arbitrarily say, for instance, that because you're 18 and you're an adult, like you can't buy cigarettes, you can't buy beer, you can't rent a car, but you're an adult. And now you can vote in the
So would you like to
participation of
lower the
democracy.
age of
At
an
least raise
adult?
it.
So you'd like to raise it?
At least raise it.
So you would like to universally raise the age to vote? I think that
At
would be a better
least.
idea than like not
No,
allowing
no. What I
anyone.
said
yeah, I'm actually not super opposed to a slight adjustment on the age of voting. I think that when you're just getting into college at age 18, it should probably be kind of like the year averagely that we're kind of done with school and going out into the workforce. So maybe like 22. I would be okay with that. That would make sense to me.
says at least do that. But the thing is, like, you're actually inconsistent here. Your whole argument is to say if laws affect people, they should have a right to vote. But we have an entire cast of people from the age 17 down who laws apply to and can't vote. And you just are like, you shrug that off like you didn't contradict yourself.
I'm pretty sure it has something to do with brain development. But we've all like you have to have an
Not fully
age at
developed
which-
till what, 25 according
But how
to
do you have a
the
society
studies?
in which you don't have an age that someone becomes a legal
I
adult?
agree, but why couldn't you have a society in which you had stakeholder democracy? It would
Because
be, it's the
nobody's-
same logic.
So if you're saying that we should not disenfranchise children, why would you then disenfranchise people who are legal adults?
When did I ever make the claim that I wanted children to be able to vote?
You just said that if everyone should have the
No,
right
I
to vote.
told you that your view is inconsistent. If it is the case propositionally, you say, Andrew, if laws apply to people, they should be able to vote. Except, I don't know, everybody 17 and under. That's inconsistent.
Because the
hang
laws
on, hang
do
on.
apply to children
It's
differently than they apply
inconsistent
to
and a
adults.
contradiction.
But laws do apply to
What about the
children
laws that
differently
don't?
than they do.
What about the laws that don't? What about the laws where you're 17 years old and you can be tried as an adult?
Well, those are to protect like public freedom.
I feel like this whole chain of question is kind of a non sequitur. Because, like, if you're a legal adult and she should be formulating it as if you're a legal adult and you're engaging with the economy and you're, no longer in school, but then what about people who skip school, or don't go to college, or there's a lot of different chains you can go down. There's always going to be like little exceptions to everything. And that's like, there's always exceptions kind of to everything. But if we're just going like in general, then I mean, he still hasn't really, neither of them have brought it up though, honestly, refuted that like the reason we have voting is so that we don't have revolutions. And that's why there aren't like massive swaths of adults that are just completely disenfranchised from voting, because before we had voting, we had revolutions. Like that's just how that goes. Like when you didn't like the rules that a king was making, you did a revolution. And now with democracy, if you don't like the rules that the government's making, you can vote. And that's kind of like I'm not going to revolt. Here's my vote instead. but neither of them have gotten to this kind of point, which I think she needs to get to, because it's a stronger point than like, if the laws affect you, you should vote. I mean, laws affect people that are here on vacation. I don't want them voting.
I mean,
Right.
but everyone loses civil liberties when they are a danger to the public.
Yeah, but
That's everyone.
do you understand that you're making a contradiction when you say if laws should apply to all people should have a right to vote because they have laws which can be applied, they can be sent to prison, was your example. That would have to include everyone under the age of 18.
But people under the age of 18 don't go to adult
Yes,
prisons.
they do all
No,
the
they
time.
don't.
Yes, they do. That
What's
is
your source?
that is you want me to give you sources of 16, 17-year-olds tried as adults and sent to adult prisons?
Okay, but that's like an exception for exclusively horrific crimes. I mean, those
But
are violent offenders.
does the law apply to them or not?
To violent offenders, if you are a threat to public safety, yes.
Okay.
Everyone who
Then
is a
if
threat
the
to public
law
safety,
applies to them and they can be sent to jail, then by your logic, they should be able to vote, which
But for
means
those
you're in
offenders, they are-
contradiction.
to those offenders, they are sent to juvenile detention centers until they turn 18, and then they are sent to an
I don't really think she's in contradiction, because we categorically don't see children and adults the same. I don't know if we really got the number of what age you are an adult correctly. It should be more dependent on competency to vote, though. Yeah, I don't know. This one I struggle with, because that's a tough thing to measure. Like, different groups would measure that different ways. Like, if a Republican wrote the test for like the voting test, it would look way different than if like a Democrat wrote the test. So like your competency to vote could be measured in like very different ways by different people that could potentially exclude just entire ideologies. Like if you just don't believe the things in the test. So I don't know. That would be a tough one. I mean, it could just be like on an IQ thing, but IQ doesn't necessarily correlate to like competency. Um it certainly doesn't correlate to what is it? It doesn't correlate to like empathy or like conscientiousness. That's it. IQ doesn't really correlate to those things. So I don't know. I get the idea of the competency. I really struggle to understand how it would be accurately measured. Darian, you were quite logical. Started following you recently. Thank you very much, Darian. And welcome to the chat. And the last one, I think feminism wouldn't really stand a chance if she granted force doctrine. Well, here's the thing. There's multiple versions of feminism. And if the version of feminism that you're supporting involves the complete dissolution of patriarchy, then yes, force doctrine is a pretty much a defeater. There are forms of feminism that don't call for the removal of patriarchy, though. And so, like, for example, Not So Erudite, she is a proponent of a type of feminism that does not require the dissolution of patriarchy. She thinks they can coexist. So if you are against an opponent that believes in one of those, then force doctrine doesn't really, it's not really a defeater for those. Like you could be a women's rights advocate. Yeah, all forms of them do appeal to patriarchy, but just appealing to patriarchy, like, so if your form of feminism doesn't call for the dissolution of patriarchy, then it can appeal to patriarchy for women's rights, and you can still be like a women's rights advocate and appeal to patriarchy for those rights. Like that's kind of where we exist currently. We sort of exist in a patriarchal and feminist society at the same time, because we have a lot of women's rights and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. Here, let's see where they go with this.
an adult prison. They are still
they're
tried as a
sent
child.
often to adult centers, even at 17, to adult prisons.
You can be sentenced as an adult, but you can't be sent to an adult prison at the age of 16.
This would depend widely on the state that you're in. It's not rigorously enforced across the board like you think. There's not like I don't think there's federal laws which say this.
Well,
But
then I
even
think
if it
that's
were the case,
wrong.
I'll just grant it.
Well, then that's wrong.
I'll even grant the entire thing. It still wouldn't matter. Laws apply to them. They can still be sent to prison. They fit both of your criteria. Therefore, if you say they shouldn't be able to vote, your worldview's in contradiction.
Well, then I think that's wrong. I don't believe that children should be tried as adults until they have become adults.
So no
I
laws
disagree with
apply to
that.
children.
No.
Well, then why shouldn't they be able to?
Darian, yeah, they're still in the is portion of the claim. They haven't really got to aughts yet. They almost did for a second. Well, the whole voting line of questioning started from an ought claim, but they went immediately back to the descriptive part.
Vote.
A threat to public safety always applies to everyone. Threats to public safety always apply to everyone.
Yeah, but why shouldn't they be able to vote if laws apply to them? That's your example.
Laws apply to children, but they are not in practice punished in the same way that they apply to adults. It's
Basic civics exam is kind of what you're saying. Yeah, that would be better. Like you have to know who your governor is, etc. You could make that pretty nonpartisan, just sort of like a current history test. I could see that possibly working. Yeah, something like that.
applied
Can they
differently.
be punished?
Of course they can
Then
be
why
punished.
can't they vote?
But you have to have some way to maintain societal control. Children aren't just allowed to do whatever the fuck they want because they're
Right.
kids.
You need to be able to have some sort of societal control. So
Yes.
this would mean necessarily disenfranchising some people, wouldn't it?
It would mean necessarily disenfranchising children. Yes, they're not
no,
adults.
it would also mean disenfranchising prisoners. Do you want prisoners to vote on their right to own guns in a prison?
Not their right to own guns in a prison.
Well, then you're
but I do
disenfranchising
think
them.
that people who were in prison and then leave prison should then have
Felons?
the right to vote.
But they're disenfranchised currently under the law, right?
No, they're not.
Yes, they are. If you're a felon, you can't vote.
Yes. Oh, well, once they leave, yes, I do think that that's disenfranchisement, and I think Florida just rolled that back.
Yeah,
for
but
Florida.
what's wrong with disenfranchising like murderers for life?
What's wrong with disenfranchisement? Well, they would be in jail for life if
No,
they
no, no.
committed a
They're
murder.
out of jail. They're just felons, so they can't vote.
Well, yeah, I think that felons should be able to vote once they
Should
have
felons
left.
be able to own guns?
No, because it's.
Oh, well, I
it's
don't
about
understand you. So you're again,
But do
you
you
are so
understand-
inconsistent with your
Pause, Naima.
disenfranchising.
Pookie, do you understand?
What?
Disenfranchisement should exist so long as someone is a threat to public safety. The reason why prisoners are not allowed to vote who are currently in prison is because they are a threat to public safety.
16-year-olds aren't a threat to public safety.
No, but they're children. You can't allow any.
Darren, Andrew could have done better here. He was not. Yeah, the voting thing, Andrew, it kind of falls apart. She wasn't making the best she's not making the best refutations ever, but his whole thing is really inconsistent. She's doing a much better job than the other three people he debated during this week, though, so far. I haven't watched the end of it yet. I've only watched what we've watched so far, so we'll see.
anyone
So
to vote
you
who's a
can
child.
arbitrarily disenfranchise people based on the fact that you think they're not capable of making good voting decisions, right?
No, a child is legally different than an adult.
Because they can't make
You can't have
good-
sex with a child.
Because
That
they
would be
can't make
statutory rape.
because they can't make good decisions.
No, because they're legally classified as a child. Do you not understand what
Because
a
they
child is?
can't make good decisions.
Because they're 2 and 3 and 4. They're not legally an
So
adult.
they can't make good decisions.
No, they can make good decisions, but generally speaking, you can't have children vote. There is a
I
legal age
agree
to
with
vote.
you. You can't.
Okay.
But why is it then that if I were just
Well, she made the ought claim that if you've served your time and then you leave, you should be able to vote, which, I mean, she can hold that position. It's not really an inconsistent position to hold.
say that I only want 25-year-olds to vote, I would be
But you
disenfranchising.
didn't say you only want 25-year-olds
but
to vote. You
do you
said
understand?
that you only want one marriage voting system per household.
Yeah,
You
well, that's
said
one way, yeah.
You want less of
But-
both adult men and
But do you
adult
understand how
women
my
to
view
be
is
able to vote.
consistent, but yours isn't? Because if you were to agree with me that you wanted, like, okay, Andrew, I would compromise at 25-year-olds voting, you've now disenfranchised everyone from the ages of 18 through 24.
If you were considered
all
a legal
overnight.
adult, you should be able to vote. That's my state. If you are considered a
Uh-huh.
legal adult, if you are tried as
Mm-hmm.
an adult, if you are allowed to buy a house,
Yeah.
have a child,
But that leads to the problem is that leads to political tribalism. So, like, for instance, why is it a healthy society to have men and women who are married voting against each other? That's a terrible idea.
because they're both Like, but if a man commits a murder, does his wife go to jail for that crime?
No.
No, because they're not the same fucking person.
What does that have to do with anything?
If they're different people and they're both tried differently and they both have separate lives and
Yeah.
separate bank accounts
Yeah.
and separate bodily and physical autonomy,
Yeah.
then they should
Well, Andrew doesn't necessarily believe that they should have separate lives and separate bank accounts. So that's probably where he's going to go with that one.
each get a stake in this government. No.
Well, that literally has nothing to do with what I just asked.
They're not the same
So
person.
real quick,
So why should they be represented
you remember
under the
how I
same
said
thing?
yes and no to your question? Can you do that for me? Remember how I was like yes and just answered it? Can you actually do that for me
I
too?
don't remember that at all.
You literally just asked me that question. You said if a husband's carted off to prison, does her wife go to prison? I said no.
Okay.
Can you do that for me too, and then give your explanation? Because otherwise, I don't
That's
know
what I
your
just did.
actual
I said
position.
His thing and then gave the explanation.
So now I'd like to know,
You should listen
do you
to
think it's a good idea for wives and husbands to be able to vote against each other's interests?
They should both have a vote, yes.
Well, but they can vote against each other's interests, right?
That is circumstantial. They may not, they might.
Yeah, they may not, they might. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But why is it good that option's even there? Seems like a terrible idea.
Because in a representative democracy, everyone should be represented with a vote.
Yeah, I get that's a descriptive truth, but you're not telling me why that should be the case. If I were to give you the counterclaim here, I would say if you had like one household voting or something like this, it would be much more uniform and wouldn't divide families against each other.
Yeah, but if you had one household voting, then any two people who got married suddenly have a vote, and his whole well-informed voter thing just falls apart because literally the two dumbest people on the planet can go get married. Like, I understand his civic duty one a little bit more than this, but this one just makes no sense at all. Like, if he doesn't want uninformed people voting, then a one vote per household system, that just makes no sense because literally any two people can get married. Like, this doesn't make any sense.
And that's exactly what the vote has done.
But they're both subject to the same legislative, like they can both be legislated independent of each other, right?
No, well, not really. One cannot at that point make a decision that doesn't affect the other one usually.
Yes, I can.
Not really. What?
I mean, Roe v. Wade. That only affects a woman's body, right? No?
You think that if a man is married to a woman and she goes and aborts his baby, that doesn't affect him?
Of course it does, but it affects him differently than his body.
But it's still, but that's my whole point is that everything they do in this household is going to affect each other.
Sure.
So you wouldn't want to promote systems
But they
which
still are
divide husbands
individuals.
against wives.
But they're individuals, no.
What is,
I agree with that general blanket statement that we should not be promoting systems that intentionally divide families. I feel like most people, not all, okay, nothing ever in a monolith, but I feel like most people tend to pair up with people that have similar values to them. It does happen a lot or not a lot, but sometimes comparatively, but I feel like for the most part, people tend to marry people that are in their similar socioeconomic circle. They usually, most people actually meet within their job field, generally speaking. If they meet in person, dating apps have kind of changed that a lot, but yeah, I don't see this like the vote like tearing families, like a husband and wife apart. That doesn't really happen a lot. You may disagree with like your uncles or like your aunts or whatever. It might cause some division at Thanksgiving dinner, but I don't think that's a common problem. Like husbands and wives completely disagreeing on like civic values and societal values.
what does that have to do with anything?
Are they the same person or not?
This is not what's in dispute.
Are they the same person or not?
Okay, no.
Then why should they not each have an individual liberty? What if they get a divorce?
Because you don't want to set up systems that divide them against each other. That's
well,
a bad
then don't
idea.
Marry someone who doesn't want to vote for you with you. But that's
No, do you understand that like people's preferences change over time, and there could be various reasons in which, if you have a tribal type of mentality, like take abortion for instance. Abortion's a great one. Do you think that it's possible that women, for instance, could hold it against their husband and say things like, do this or I'll abort your child? They could actually do that, right?
Yeah, hypothetically, sure.
Yeah, and have
that
done
would be
that.
immoral.
And have done that.
That would be immoral
Yeah,
and
but,
wrong.
but you wouldn't say they couldn't go get the abortion, would you?
But would you say a man can
But hang
rape-
on. Answer the question first.
What?
You wouldn't say that they shouldn't be allowed to do that, though, would you?
Well, if it would be disenfranchising millions of other women who aren't
No,
in that
no, no.
situation
That's
and need an
can you,
abortion, then
yes or no, please. You wouldn't say that you would not actually say that they should not be allowed to get the abortion, right?
no, I think everyone should have access to
Okay,
free
so
will.
even if it were the case that a woman, right, was holding the man basically emotionally hostage with her pregnancy and said, do what I say or I'll get an abortion, right, you would not make any claim that she could or could not get that abortion, would you?
I would make a claim that what she's doing is immoral, but I wouldn't make a claim that
And
because
should
one
anything
person is
happen to a
immoral-
woman who does that?
Yeah,
What?
I mean, that's blackmailing. I think
It's
it's a
not
crime.
blackmail.
I think on a level it's emotional blackmail. I
Yeah.
think you should be able
So
to sue someone
what
for
should happen?
emotional
Should they
blackmail.
go to jail?
I like that concession. I think you should be able to sue someone for emotional blackmail. It would be hard. It would definitely be a interesting level of evidentiary. I can't remember the word, but it would be a high level of evidence for sure. It'd be tough to have that amount of emotional blackmail evidence, but that was a good concession.
I mean, maybe pay damages or a fine.
A fine?
Yeah.
How much should the fine be?
I don't know.
$200?
How
Dude.
much is an abortion?
They'd be the same as an abortion.
Can I ask you a question?
So just
Can
to
I
get
ask
this
you a
right, well, I
question?
want to finish this real quick.
No, can
and
I
then we
ask
can
you a
move
question?
back. Well, no, you can't till I finish the inquiry.
Okay,
but
well,
then
I'm not
can,
going to answer your question.
But then,
until I
but you
ask
can
mine.
inquire back. I just want to finish this inquiry,
Go
the
for
line
it.
of inquiry. That's all. So just to make sure I got this right, you have now said that the tribal voting does indeed pit husband against wife, has a potential to do so, right?
No.
And I've even conceded to.
It has the potential to do so, but I don't think that's a super frequent thing that happens. I think most people marry people with similar values, especially societal values. So I don't know how I feel about that.
Specific examples of where it would be in a woman's interest to vote against her husband, to have a right to do something which could be used against him later, and then said, well, the punishment should be like, oh, maybe she pays a fine if something like that happens. And how are you going to convince people that that's a better system than one household voting? That's a terrible system.
Because then the leader of that household or the head of that household has control over the right and the will of every single person in that household. You're fundamentally denying people free will. They're
I'm
not
not-
allowed to. Yes, they are. Because if they're
Fundamental
both
denying
legislated,
of free will, huh?
because if they're both legislated by the same government, and one of them has no say in who is elected into that government,
So?
but still, because you're still
They still have
impacted
free
by
will.
law, but you're still impacted by laws.
So what? You're being
Yeah, this doesn't really have anything to do with free will, but there may be a point behind what she's saying, but she's definitely using the wrong words to describe it. So I'm not 100% sure what that point would be. Maybe she'll get around to it.
impacted by laws when you're 17. They can't vote. You have a consistency
Not at the
issue.
same extent as an 18-year-old. Not at the same
They
extent as an
can
adult.
have it to the same extent as an 18-year-old.
In very rare exceptions, but you're
Yeah, but they
fighting on
can
it.
then. So
you're-
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's a very loose use of the term free will. I'm not really sure what she actually meant by that.
you're
fighting on an
disenfranchising
exception.
people.
But look at you. You're around the fringe. You're fighting on an exception. We're talking about the general population.
Even
right
in the
now.
general
I'm not talking about
population,
murderers. I'm
yeah.
not talking about
So
serial
let's start
killers.
with
I'm not
this.
talking about school shooters.
I don't think it's generally speaking a good idea to let 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds to vote, to disenfranchise the votes of people who are politically informed, because they're being used as a leverage voting block for elitists. And that's what's actually happening. What's actually happening was what you just said. You know, NGOs and lobbyists are lobbying Congress to get various things passed, and what they do is they try to leverage the votes from a tribalist purview in order to get the things that they want, right? And 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds are highly impressionable, right? So are 22, 23, 24, 25-year-olds highly impressionable. And one way that you could eliminate this idea that they could be gone after by the parasitic NGOs who run things is by simply limiting the ability to vote to people who have such a political.
Maybe she meant it limits their input on society. Yeah. She should have just stuck with the disenfranchisement term that she was using. because that was more directly applicable. Free will is like a really nebulous thing that I mean, we all kind of have it, but it's always sort of restricted, but you can always just ignore the restrictions. It's a very weird nebulous term to begin with. It's like the concept of rights. It's like, yeah, you kind of have rights, but like you actually don't. It's interesting.
Political interest that they actually do social service for up to 5 years so that then we can trust them with the right to vote.
Okay, I have two statements. Can you let me get through them?
Sure.
Okay, so here's number one. I agree that lobbying generally is bad. I'm not here for NGOs. I don't think anyone really is. I mean, and the whole point of why we don't like them is because we want to be represented by our legislators fairly and accurately, and we don't want it to be in the control of a private interest group.
So lobbying's bad.
Yes, generally, I think that lobbyists and NGOs are not
bad.
good. But what I don't understand is, if that's the issue, why not ban NGOs? Why not have a platform that's standing against NGOs and lobbyists? I think that'd be something great.
Yeah, so
if you did that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so this is a great question, but here's the problem, right?
Yeah.
This is the leverage of tribalism and why you can't really do that. So on social issues, right? There are NGOs out there, for instance, who have a vested interest in abortions being legal, right? This goes out into the social ethos, and now we're battling over the social issue. We have become tribal, right? We've become tribal. Then you have NGOs who battle against it, let's say, this social issue. They also are making a ton of money off of the counter battle, let's say, also utilizing political tribalism. The whole idea here is divisive tribalism is what enables NGOs to begin with. They make a ton of money off of it, especially off of race hustling and DEI.
So then again, why not just ban NGOs and lobbyists?
Yeah,
and
you can't
allow everyone to still have a vote in a representative
I'm giving
democracy.
you the descriptor.
I think it's hilarious that you keep calling democracy tribalism.
It leads to tribalism, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean,
Full democracy leads to tribalism.
Partial democracy leads to tribalism. This whole conversation about tribalism is so pointless. Like, no matter what the political system is, we're always going to organize into groups that have similar ideas or similar geographies, or it's always gonna, you can always apply the tribalism definition to this. This is all kind of like a giant non sequitur. I knew so many commie high schoolers before I graduated who almost immediately changed their mind when they started working. Yeah, I feel like most of the communists settle on just sort of like a regular liberalism, like a capitalist, like a stakeholder capitalist liberalism. She continues to use it very differently throughout the conversation. Yeah, the free will one she keeps using way differently, and it's too nebulous of a term to be using. It's the disenfranchisement was much more to the point.
There's no way around it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so does sports. Sure.
So should we ban sports?
No, why would you ban sports?
Well, that doesn't make sense.
That's a total
would you
non sequitur.
ban-
It makes no sense.
Why would you ban a huge percentage of the population from voting?
Because I would want to avoid political tribalism so that elitists can't exploit low information voters, which they do right now, in order to enslave the planet.
So you're basically saying that people are too stupid to have the right to vote?
Yes.
But in both of the ideas Andrew put forward, the marriage one and the civic service one, stupid people can both do those things. You still have stupid voters. In fact, lower intelligence people might be more inclined to civic duty so that they could get their right to vote, as opposed to high IQ people who would just be able to skip that part and go straight to the workforce and make a bunch of money. So if that's his goal, it just doesn't really make sense, either of the two propositions he's putting forward.
That's dumb, dude.
Don't you agree with that?
Yeah, of course I think people are stupid.
Well,
But
then, well, then what are you arguing with me
because
about?
if I want a right to vote, then I should give them the right to vote.
Why? But listen, think about what you just said. Yeah, dude, I agree that people are too stupid to vote, but give them the right to vote anyway.
I don't think people are too stupid to vote.
Why? So they're too stupid to function, but they're smart enough. Oh, come on. You think that people who go and generally cast a ballot are high information voters, or they barely even know what the hell they're talking about?
I mean, do you have a statistic on how many of them are?
Yeah, you could do street polls. A lot of people have no idea what's even going on with the issues. A lot of people are just bused to poll booths. They get bribed to do it. This happens on both sides of the aisle. Like, how many times have you seen canvassing campaigns who go out there and they're canvassing, they knock on doors, that people don't even know what the hell they're talking about?
So what, you think we should do an IQ test for everyone to have the right to vote?
That's been suggested, right? But I have a better plan than an IQ test. I would not disenfranchise a person from being able to vote because they have like an average IQ.
Yeah.
What I would do is disenfranchise a person to vote if they were low information. One way I could find out if they were really politically motivated is if they sacrificed years of their lives to the state in order to get that right to vote.
So you want to punish people for being stupid?
Or they just want room and board for 5 years. I mean, that's why a lot of people join the army. It's for either the education, the room and board, along with, job training. There's a whole bunch of reasons that people could do that and have no intention of becoming more informed while they're there.
No, I just don't want them to nullify well-informed votes from people who are smart and on the issues and understand the issues.
But taking away someone's vote would be punishing them in a sense.
It's not punishing them.
Yeah,
It's actually stopping them from punishing themselves and the rest of society because they're easily exploited by social elites.
That's fair. I mean, but why not then just target education? Like, why not then
We
try to
spend
fund
5% of the entire GDP of the United States on education. It's the highest anywhere in the world, and we have some of the dumbest people on planet Earth. Our literacy rate is barely, you know what the literacy rate is.
Yeah, it's garbage.
It's trash. And
Yeah.
we spend 5%, the biggest GDP on planet Earth. We spend 5% total of our GDP on education. And you think that education's going to solve the problem of the low information
Well,
voter?
the issue is that people are stupid. Help them be smarter.
Well, I don't think it's about the amount of money that we spend on education. I think it's just how we educate is fundamentally flawed. And what we teach is fundamentally misguided. There's all kinds of things that could change with the education system that would make things better without actually changing the amount that we spent on it. I don't think the amount that we spend on it is really that much of a correlation to why we have such a high number of uneducated people in the United States right now.
There's a lot of that
But honestly, the illiteracy thing, wild. I mean, that's like the first thing I learned was how to read. Like, how do you even keep going to school if you're not literate? It just doesn't even make sense. How do you even doom scroll TikTok if you can't read? Like, where are all these people that can't read? I don't know where that number is coming from, but that one scares me.
Is a mixture of genes and environment and nourishment and all sorts of different things. It's like you can't, this whole progressive
Well, if
idea.
it's environment and nourishment,
Hang on.
then why not attack
This
those
whole
things?
stupid progressive idea of like, you can just educate people into whatever it is that it's like, no, you really can't. Like, there's a lot of people who are just going to be fucking janitors, okay? There's a lot of, okay?
All right.
There's a lot of people who are just going to be fucking janitors and who are just going to be fucking toilet bowl cleaners and who are just going to be fucking bartenders and are really not meant to build fucking rocket ships, okay?
I know, but there's still
Yeah, but none of your solutions are going to just rope in the people that can build rocket ships, Andrew. Come on, you're going to get a ton of janitors. They're going to go into civic service for 5 years and then go back to being janitors that can vote. Like, okay.
subject to laws, so they
Yeah, I
still get
know,
a
but
say.
just being
and it's
but
frustrating, but it's just a fact.
Yeah,
if I want free will and they want, and you want free will, and we deserve the right to vote, then they do too.
No, you're not eliminating free will by this.
You are,
You're
though.
protecting the rest of society from low information.
No, I have a slight agreement with Andrew on this one because this has nothing to do with free will at all. Nothing at all to do with free will.
Information voters destroying their lives. Like,
Yeah,
do you
but
think
you
really
still
think?
can't
Let me ask
take
you this.
someone else's free
Let me
will
ask you
because
this.
they're stupid.
If you were to, yeah, but you're not really doing that. What
You
you're
are.
doing.
A vote is an exercise
No.
in free will.
Let me ask you this. If you had to choose,
Yes.
right, for your family,
Sure.
and you knew that you could move them to a place where there was a bunch of people who were highly informed on political processes in the local community, or you can move them to a place where people didn't give a shit, right? Which place would you prefer them to be?
I would prefer them to be in the higher.
Of course,
Obviously,
right? At
yeah.
the place where the people are the most
Hold on.
informed.
Speaking of which, my mother's calling me. Here, I'm going to screen her. Sorry, Mom. Love you.
Now, if you were
Mom calling in the middle of a debate. Doesn't mom know where she is? Well, actually, she's like an adult, so maybe she doesn't know. But hi, Mom.
able to, if these people were able to cast votes and nullify all of the votes of you high information voters, right? Wouldn't it actually be better for them and for you to disenfranchise their voting so that you guys could actually vote on political and policy issues that made sense?
Well, I don't think that stupid people are nullifying all of the votes of smart people.
Really?
I
Think
mean,
about what you
all
just
of
said.
them.
Can you
Not
think
all
about
of
what
them.
you just do you
Not
think there's
all
more
of
stupid
them.
people or smart people?
Oof.
In this country, yeah, it's probably more.
Okay, so you really
Yeah.
don't think stupid people are nullifying the votes of smart people?
On a certain level, yeah.
Yeah.
But at the
I have no, because honestly, only about half of people vote anyway, so I have no idea how we would quantify this or figure this out. Like, is it mostly the stupid people that are voting? Is it mostly the smart people that are voting? I have no idea. I don't know how, I mean, I have no idea.
same time, they still deserve free will. I can't
They
rob
still
someone.
have free will.
They don't, because they're still subject to the laws of the
Voting is a
country.
privilege. If you go to Australia and you commit a crime, can you go to jail in Australia?
Yeah,
But you can't vote in Australia, right?
sure.
So do you see how that makes no sense? Like
It
what
does
you're
make
saying
sense,
makes
though.
no
I mean, if you
sense.
travel to another country and endanger people, like that's a threat.
You're not
to
even
public
endangering
safety.
people. If you're just like drunk in public, you can be arrested.
That is a threat to public safety.
No.
Public intoxication is a
Look,
threat to public
that
safety.
doesn't mean you're going to actually do anything wrong, right?
But you could.
Yeah.
I mean, drunken people are habitually more
you
violent,
could break
statistically more
or
violent.
you could break some public ordinance, right? You could break some public ordinance you didn't know about, like you're on a beach, right?
Yeah.
And you're in your shorts, and it was supposed to be t-shirts and shorts, something like this.
Yeah, but breaking public ordinances doesn't lead to jail time.
It does if you don't pay the fine.
Well, then you should pay the fucking fine.
Well, see what I mean, though? So you are subject to those laws,
Yes.
and you are subject to imprisonment based on those laws.
You
And if
should
that's the case, you can't vote in those countries.
Okay, but you're not.
That's a good point. And I think I brought that point up earlier. Like, people on vacation are subject to the laws, but they're not subject to the full integration of the system like we are. It's a little bit different. He could solve the civic duty front by dictating that the ones who are doing it must serve in the branches of government that require civic knowledge. Possibly. I feel like he'd still be now he'd be on the other end losing a bunch of informed voters. And that would be tough. Like, because he was mentioning that it would be like firefighters and EMTs and military people. So it wasn't like people working in the government. I don't know. I don't think he thought this all the way through. Because his original, I've heard him make the claim on multiple occasions that just women shouldn't be able to vote. And that most men shouldn't be able to vote, but definitely women shouldn't be able to vote. And it feels like he's walking that back, but he didn't really fully flesh out the walked back position yet. And I've never heard him make this full argument before. So I feel like he's kind of using this debate as like a test run for this argument. But yeah, I don't know.
You're not a citizen of that country. You're still a citizen of this country. If you were a citizen
That's my
of this
whole
country
point,
and you
though.
live here and you are subject to the
Yeah.
laws of this country for your entire life, from
Yeah.
birth to death,
Yeah.
you should have
Why do you
a stake.
want dumb people to disenfranchise your well-informed vote? That makes no sense. Not only that, you say that you're actually emboldening them with their free will, right? It's like, that's so silly, because ultimately, these people who are politically low information, they're so low information, you're allowing them to get taken advantage of.
Of course I don't want dumb people to disenfranchise my vote, but I don't think that the solution to that is a one marriage voting system, or you have to do public service for 5 years to have a...
Give me an alternative.
But can't dumb people do that too? Like, couldn't a dumb person just do some fucking community service for 5 years and then get paid? I mean, like, there are dumb people in the army.
Listen, I agree with you that there can be some...
Exactly. Dumb people could do it too. And there you go.
Some stupid people who get through the system, but they're not going to be probably low information. You're not going to go through 5 years of civil service like that for the purpose of being able to vote and be low information, or you wouldn't do it. You have an interest. That's what the whole point is.
Well, I mean, if your housing and your food is paid for, I think there are a lot of people who would be interested in that. The army. I mean, that's like exactly a
the
version
army.
of
You
civil
have
service.
to take the army. You have to take an ASVAB test, and you have to score X amount of a score in order to even be placed in those things.
Big dog, my boy.
That's a placement test. That's not a whether or not you can get into the army test. Maybe I'm confused, but yeah, but people do that now, kind of. Like, but you get paid to do it now. I don't know. I think just the room and board for 5 years and just not having to worry about anything and then being able to put that on your resume for future jobs, I think that would be a big enough incentive just on its own. So I don't know if they would be inspired to like become informed while they were busy doing this this other job. Especially if it's just like firefighter or EMT or military like he was mentioning. Maybe it would be a higher with the military because like you're fighting wars on behalf, so maybe you would want to become more informed. But like a firefighter, just getting room and board to be a firefighter, I don't know if that would incentivize them to become informed. I'm not sure.
Boyfriend's a vet. He talks about some dumb motherfuckers in the army.
Sure, there's dumb people in the army.
But so they would
But
be
to
given...
qualify for certain jobs, you can't be. And for civil service or something like this, you can do intelligence tests or things like that.
Okay, so you're basically saying there should be an IQ test, and only those who would like to be civil servants who pass that IQ test.
Well, I think you should
vote.
probably implement an IQ test for the military too, which they do.
Yeah, but people suck.
I mean, but they do.
Do
But they do, unless it's in wartime and they're like, okay, well, you just need a body in here.
She right though. There's some dum-dums in the military, so I don't. Yeah.
And then they'll grab anybody off the street. But yeah.
Can we ask about right now? I want to confirm that.
Of course.
Aiden,
Are we getting a boyfriend cameo?
do you do IQ tests for the military?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, man. I knew guys in the army who were like mentally. Wait, you want boyfriend reveal?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Wait. Oh, go. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just go around that way.
Army. No, I'm playing.
Yeah, there are people who are there who are dumb. That's true. But they.
Here, baby, come here for us.
If you can,
Yeah.
just kind of like.
I've heard of
Oh,
that.
boy.
It's called a Cat
Right
5
here.
waiver, right? They give them a Cat 5 waiver.
I'm talking about category 5 waivers. I'm talking about. Can you just.
Baby, come here.
Shalom. Hi.
Not so up.
In terms of like people in the army and IQ tests, like I've taken the ASVAB, it is not a very difficult test, and a lot of people get their ASVABs taken for them. I knew guys in the army who were like medically diagnosable with mental deficiencies and were still in the army doing jobs that in theory required a certain level of mental faculty.
Sure. Yeah, the system can get gamed, but those are exceptions, not the rule.
I wouldn't really go that far, to be honest with you. And then also in terms of your,
You don't think the majority of people are stupid or in the army are stupid, do you?
I think that there are a great number of people who join the army because they want a place to live and food, which is the system you just described, and that's pretty much independent of intelligence.
They seem to be joining the army based around patriotism, the
When were
ability
you
to
in the
get
army?
paid, the ability to do
When were you
things
in the
like
army,
that.
Ron?
What's that?
When were you in the army?
I was in the army for a very limited amount of time, years and years ago.
How long was that very limited amount of time, if you don't mind me asking?
It wasn't very long, about a year.
About a year. So what happened? 'Cause
Well,
actually,
it doesn't matter what happened.
Oh, but we're talking about service, man.
What about it?
So you want to disenfranchise people based on military service. I actually know why most
Why
people
would?
join the
What are
army.
you talking about? How would I disenfranchise them based on military service?
No, you
it would be the opposite.
Those who
Yeah, boyfriend's confused now. It's okay. Go sit back down.
Requiring people to serve
No,
in
it wouldn't
military.
require them to serve in the army. Literally didn't say that.
I'm sorry about
All right,
that. Yeah.
baby.
Yeah, I literally didn't say that.
Thank you for your help.
I
my love.
disagree. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna
Okay.
readjust this.
So now we've established that people in the Army can very much be stupid.
Yeah, they can be. Yes, they can be dum-dums. They're definitely like I know a lot of them, honestly. I will be right back. Give me like 2 minutes. Alrighty. All right, quick restroom break. All right, where were we? Oh, right. Boyfriend swung by, gave his opinion, got a little confused at the end, and took off. So here we go.
So
Nobody ever
Thank you,
disputed
Travis.
you can have stupid people
Had to take a quick bathroom break there.
in the Army.
okay, so again, we're trying to go
My
back.
question-
We're trying to
yeah.
figure out
So
how
let's see
your
if we can't.
system would work
Yeah, so
in
s-
terms of
Yeah.
those who are participating in some sort of civil service.
Yeah, so you would have some
are-
type of civil service, right? Which
Okay.
a person would participate in
Wow, they've been talking about voting for like 50 minutes. I can't believe they've been talking about this for this long.
for at least 5 years.
5 years.
Oh, hey, we got a Rachel Wilson cameo here. Let's see. Civil competence test, net zero taxpayer, one household vote, anything where you have to prove you've skin in the game. So would it be all of these things? And understand basics of governance? So you'd have to do all of these things. I feel like they just came up with this plan and they haven't really thought it all the way through.
Years.
Yes, unpaid.
5?
Yes, unpaid.
That's ridiculous.
Why? Do you think that the person who participated in it for 5 years unpaid would really want to be politically informed by the end of that? Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
that's
the-
5 years of not having, like, that's 5 years of, like, housing is paid for, food is paid
Service
for.
guarantees citizenship.
So can I ask who's paying for 5 years of millions of people participating in a civil?
Well, chances would be pretty good it wouldn't be millions, or at least not hundreds of millions of people participating in such a system.
So
It'd be
you
a
would
very
like to
low
limit the
demographic.
voting block in this country to less than, there's 430 million people in this country, and you'd like to limit it
Nah,
to less
330 million.
than hundreds of millions?
It's 330 million in the United States, I think. 336 million or something.
Regardless, you would still like to limit it to, I misspoke, my bad, but you
Yeah.
would still like to limit it to less than, you would like to limit it to hundreds of thousands of people?
Yeah.
You think it's fair for hundreds of thousands of people to speak on behalf of 360 million people?
Do you think it's fair right now to have 100 senators do that?
No, but we still vote for the senators.
Yeah,
we
I
vote
know,
for
but
the senators,
do you
though.
really think you're getting?
They don't just
hang
walk
on.
up and say, "Hello,
Do you
sir, I would
do
like
you
to
think
be a
you're
senator."
really
Like,
getting
you're voting.
Wait, you think you're really getting political representation inside of a state like New York with 2 people?
I don't live in New York, though.
I know, but inside the state of New York, do you
I don't think he was asking if you live in New York, Naima. Isn't the House of Representatives supposed to sort of like account for that by having it more representative of the population of each state? I mean, I know it's not perfect by any means, but that's kind of like what we agreed to. Like things, I'm pretty sure all things have to go through the House first. I might be wrong. My civics is not 100% up to par. I'm more on the cultural, societal side of things, but
really think the state of New York is getting adequate political representation on Capitol Hill with 2 fucking people?
Well, that's why you have the Senate and the House, and the House. is
2
based on-
people who are your senator. You really think
Every
that
state gets 2 senators.
100 people are representing 330 million people? At the very top, it's 1 person who's representing 330 million people's
So are you
interests.
advocating that we shouldn't have government?
No,
at
what
all?
I'm saying to you is that, like, it's very silly for me to look at an argument like you're making and say, oh my God, 100,000 people are going to be in charge, or 200,000 people are going to be in charge. Like, ultimately, 1 person's in charge.
So you're saying
Ultimately, 1 person's in charge.
but there's still checks and balances. That 1 person isn't a king.
There
They don't
still
have
would be checks and
tyrannical
balances with
monopoly over
limited
all
voting.
Power in the guard.
There's still checks and balances with limited voting.
Yeah, but we still do not get to decide who is in our legislature. As a voting body, we do not get to decide who is
You
in
would
the
still
legislature.
have people from within your various communities who would be voters, and they would decide who it is that went to represent you on Capitol Hill.
That sounds very expensive and very pointless, if I'm being honest.
How is that expensive? Okay, fine.
Because you
Then
have
if
to
you
pay
wanna-
for all their houses.
then if
I think senators should go back to the way it was. Senators used to be picked by the state. I'm assuming you meant state. Oh, okay. Your correction was not the correction. Picked by the state and represent the state, and the Congress represents the people. Yeah, you should see me trying to type words on my phone. Yeah, I'm not entirely opposed to that. Not entirely.
If you want to do that, there's another way you could do this too. If you didn't want to do like the civil service way, you could do 1 vote per household. That would limit the voting significantly. Hang on.
Okay.
And it would be not expensive at all. But
Okay.
there's even another way that you can do it on top of that.
Alrighty,
Right? But let's just start with like 1 household voting.
Okay.
Same thing.
let's do it.
You can eliminate whatever this like perceived cost is that you have. Another thing you could do is just eliminate anybody being able to vote until they reach the same age that they could become president of the United States.
Okay. So 35? That's I don't know. I don't know about that one.
Is that not 35?
Mm-hmm.
So you think that everyone under 35 should lose the right to vote?
Why shouldn't everyone under 35
That
be
was the
able?
most boomer shit I've ever
Why
heard
shouldn't
in my
everybody
life.
under 35 be able to be the president of the United States?
Well, because they don't have the. But they're
While it's not a debate argument, I agree that's some boomer shit.
still.
Why? Answer the question.
Because they do not yet have the experience in politics to run an entire country.
So
but just
yeah,
because you can't
exactly.
okay, Andrew. But just because you can't run an entire country doesn't mean that you should still not have the right to have 1 singular vote. It's 1 vote.
What are you talking about?
Yes, you can't be the president, but you are still susceptible to the laws. You can have a kid at 35. You can have a house at 35.
So,
Like,
what does that have to do with anything? But you can't be president.
below
Can't be
35,
president. Yeah.
legislatively,
Yeah.
below 35,
Yeah.
from 18 to 34, all of these people are impacted at the same level.
No, they're not all impacted at the same level. In fact, I would say.
Can they
I
all
would
go to
say-
jail for committing a crime?
Yes, I would say the
Then
opposite.
yes, they're
I would
impacted
say
at the
like
level.
people between the ages of 18 and like 25 are mostly living at home, right? And their parents are the ones who are mostly impacted by legislation, not them. And
That
their
sounds like a
parents.
skill issue.
And their parents should actually probably have more say than them. Their parents actually have more autonomy than they do because they're dependents on them, right? Completely dependent upon them. It's like, if I look at the trends, it seems to me like if you eliminated from 18 to 25 or from 25 to 35, if the founders didn't think you should be president of the United States till you were 35, I don't think they wanted you to vote either. And you know what? That's why it was never law. Voting
Andrew,
rights
this is
are
some
affirmed.
This is some old shit. my
That's not an
dog.
argument.
This
That's
is
not an
giving-
argument.
Well, I mean, the reason why
Give me
you're
the
saying this is
argument.
because you're young, you're old. Like, you are not applicable to this law.
What did that have to do with anything?
You're trying to govern a group of people that you are not a member of.
So?
That's the issue.
So what?
Everyone should be representative government.
So how old do you think the average person who's in Congress is?
Hella old, and we
they're
hate
representing all of you. What
that.
do
And
you mean?
I hate that.
So you think that like 19-year-olds are going to be better governing than 60-year-olds?
No, but
Isn't it like 30 to be in like Congress? So like you could be old enough in Andrew's little world that he just created. You could be old enough to be in Congress, but not old enough to vote. That's a little, I don't know about that one. Also, I'm very frustrated by the fact that neither of them have gotten to the actual best refutation of what Andrew's saying, which is that the right to vote being as universal as possible limits the likelihood of revolution. That's the main reason we have it. It's instead of, I don't like the government, I'm going to do a revolution. It's, I don't like the government, I get to vote. That's like the main argument. And neither of them have touched on that at all.
I think I don't think an 80-year-old would be a representative government.
Yeah,
I'm
but
glad Mitch McConnell's
80-year-olds are
stepping down. Too
dying in their
old.
depends. They're not governing. What do you mean?
Yes, they are.
No, they're
Sleepy
not.
Joe.
Sleepy Joe, who is in his 80s, now has cancer, and he's not president because he went off the deep end.
I know.
Your
And Trump is in his 70s, and Mitch McConnell is in his 80s.
Listen,
All of these people
your
are hella
presidents,
old.
your presidents and congressmen are running like between the late 40s to 50s to 60s. You don't really think that replacing them with 20-year-olds is a good idea, do you?
I don't think we should replace them with 20-year-olds, but
Why
I'd
not?
settle for
Why
a
not? Wait,
smooth
why
40.
not? Why not?
Well, they'd have to be elected first.
Yeah,
no?
I know, but even if they were, don't you think that would still probably not be the worst, that wouldn't be a good idea?
If they were elected
Uh-huh.
through a democratic representative democracy.
Don't you think they would do a
would
worse
not have a
job,
problem
though,
with that.
than 40, 50, 60-year-olds would?
Well, we don't know who it is. You can't just say universally, I think a 20-year-old would be worse if they are
Lord.
elected democratically.
Well, why do you think our founders thought that 35 years old was the minimum?
I think the founders thought 35 should be the minimum because you need experience in government to be the head of the government.
No
which I agree
experience in
with.
government is even required to become the president of the United States, 0.
Sure.
So why this age of 35?
Well, because you have to have lived in this country for long enough to understand it on a basic level.
Because they also thought you just didn't have the requisite experience probably in life to govern at all.
That's fair. To govern the entire country, I would say that
To govern
someone under-
anybody?
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I think so.
Well,
I
then why
mean,
can't
why is it that they didn't let people vote? Why do you think they didn't want people to vote?
I mean, dude, they were kind of fucked up. I mean, do you really want to base all of your beliefs on the founding fathers? They owned slaves. Like,
So?
so.
The whole world owned slaves.
Just because a lot of people do something doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, we were some of the first to take people out of slavery, especially the West.
Pretty sure that was England. France did it second.
The West, then?
That's
That's the West. England.
that's not America.
That's the West, which is what I said. The
But do you know the
West.
difference? You said we were the first as in America.
The
no?
West is
Oh.
what I said.
I
The
mean, I don't
West.
think we're the same country as England. Sure, we're like
Yeah,
all
but
in
we're
the
part
same
of the
hemisphere.
West, right?
Yeah,
Like
but
England?
We are not run by the same government as England.
Yeah,
we
but
fought a whole
but
war
we're
about
part
it.
of the West, and I said the West is the ones who.
You can't
took
take
us-
credit for something another country did, dog.
Well,
What?
first of all, many of the people who came here from England, right? The idea of the repudiation of slavery came from those very
This entire blah, blah, blah. This entire train of thought is just a complete non sequitur.
same dogmas.
What time
So,
is it, Brian, by
so
the
I don't know what you're talking
We're
about.
at 4:30. at the
We're at
moment.
4. Okay, dude, you've just spent the last hour trying to defend the belief that both
Also, we haven't seen an ad yet. Did this video not get monetized? Interesting.
sexes should be somehow disenfranchised from voting. This whole one per household, the one marriage system, and I think fundamentally you
And
have
you-
not been able to create an appeal to
Why
how
are we
this
in
would
like
work
closing
practically.
statements here?
Well, because we're supposed to be debating feminism. We never even got to it.
Well, this would
do
be
you-
a key component to this actually, but I'm actually fine with this if you want to move it on to that. Like, but
I
here's
mean,
the thing:
if
you
you wanna
never
keep
made
doing
a
it, we
single
can.
argument.
The argument is that people should be legislatively represented and allowed to vote
Yeah,
in
that's
a
an
representative
assertion.
democracy.
That's just an assertion, not an argument. That's just like, I think so.
The argument is that people are impacted by the laws that
Okay.
legislators
Yeah, she definitely made an argument. She didn't make the best argument. Neither of them even got to the point of the best argument, which I've mentioned a few times already. So I won't get into it again, but she has been making arguments. Whether or not he agrees with them is a whole separate issue.
create, then they should have a say in who those legislators are.
Yeah, but
whether it's a small say,
but that's a
okay.
performative contradiction, because you said that people who are affected by laws who A, don't live here, or B, are younger than a certain threshold should be disenfranchised.
It's not a performative contradiction. It's the point of democracy.
No, it's,
is
listen.
that we should be represented by a representative government.
I need you to understand this logically, that you're performing a contradiction.
It doesn't make sense logically because it's a logical fallacy. You were arguing a logical fallacy.
No, what's the fallacy?
The fallacy is that you're trying to essentially stop stupid people from voting by making sure that less people can vote.
That's not a logical fallacy.
Well, you didn't let me finish the sentence.
Okay.
You're trying to stop stupid people from voting by making it so that less people can vote, which is in turn taking away the power of the voter.
What's the fallacy?
Well, you're trying to empower voters by taking away voters' power.
Yeah, how is that a logical fallacy?
You can't empower voters by taking away their power.
It's not a logical fallacy because the people who could still vote would have their vote would mean more, so they would be more empowered. So it's not a logical fallacy. The actual fallacy would be the prescriptions he's chosen to decide who might be able to vote wouldn't necessarily result in more informed voters. That would be maybe the fallacy there. But it's not what you just said.
How am I trying to empower voters? What are you talking
about? The whole point
about?
is that you're trying to combat tribalism and that you want smart people's votes to not be nullified by stupid
What does that have to do with empowering voters?
I thought that's why you're against NGOs, lobbyists, bribes. You want to empower the people.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So you just don't want the country
I don't even
to
know
be
what you're talking about. What I'm saying to you is that if you want to eliminate tribalism, you don't want to have nothing but an unlimited amount of people voting, where NGOs can mark to the stupid people and bend them to their will, and now have that entire bracket for whatever it is their political agendas are.
So again, why not just get rid of NGOs? Why is, oh my God, NGOs are a problem.
Would you
Let's
like
make
to,
sure less people can vote.
Gee, I'd never thought of that. Why don't we get rid of NGOs, the people who are utilizing tribalism so that they exist? Boy, I wish I had thought of that.
You're utilizing tribalism?
No, they're utilizing tribalism so they exist.
Okay, but you're a political pundit. You have the power to help people. Why not promote a stance that is actually useful to them instead of trying to take away their vote?
Great. A stance that would be actually useful to them would be having their well-informed votes not nullified by non-well-informed voters of what you believe and I believe are more than the well-informed voters. That's exactly something I can do to help everybody.
But you're not helping everyone because stupid people still live here.
So what?
They still have a right to exist in a society.
Who's taking away their right to exist in a society? Nobody.
Yes, you are, because they are.
How?
If they are still held accountable to the same laws, but now have no right or vote or say in who is enacting those laws and who is representing them in government.
Like 17-year-olds?
Final statement from
They're
both
children.
Of you on this, if you
They don't pay taxes.
Final statement is like, her position's a contradiction. She says everybody should be able to vote inside of a country where they are governed by the laws. The problem is that then she says all sorts of people who fall into the criteria of being supported by laws shouldn't be able to vote. It's literally a performative contradiction. Then she moves to my view and agrees with my view that mostly that stupid people outnumber smart voters, and when you're talking about ill-informed voters, that NGOs often take advantage of them.
Blackbeard, you better be good, earn my like. All right, well, I guess it depends on how you define good and what you like. We'll see. They're kind of wrapping up this part of the debate, so we'll see what they get into next.
She literally agrees with all of this, but somehow still thinks it's a better idea to allow this to continue because I don't know. She never really gave an argument for that. I don't really actually know why.
My turn?
Yeah, you can respond.
Okay. I mean, I get that you don't understand why, and I get that you don't understand my argument, and I'm sorry. I hope one day you do. But What I will say is generally, yes, it's annoying that stupid people are allowed to vote, even though they sometimes make poor choices and fight against their own self-interest. Yes, we don't like that. Yes, we don't agree. We do agree that lobbyists and NGOs have way too much power in setting precedents for laws. Those are both things that we mutually agree upon. However, I do not think that it is fair to create a limited democracy that in turn disenfranchises voters on the basis of being stupid. I don't think that there is any way to practically enact that. I don't understand why we would do that.
You could enact
I
it with a
think that,
constitutional convention. That's how you would do it.
and you don't think that the millions of people who now have lost the right to vote they'd be like, okay.
Travis Guy, all right repairman, found you randomly. Got a follow from me. Watch you later. Thanks, Travis. I really appreciate it, man.
Well, they wouldn't have a choice.
I mean, sure. Protests, riots, there's all sorts of ways that people have fought against a government. I mean, would you, like, you're basically trying to call the country's bluff on whether or not they care about having the right to vote, which I think is just stupid. I think personally it's pointless, and I think that the function of a democracy is to make sure that everyone who has to abide by these laws
go get
is
some
represented in government. Is that flawed? Yes.
That's not even
But the
true.
way,
Like,
are
that's
you
not.
gonna let me finish? Did I interrupt
Let's let
you?
her finish, then we're moving
Oh,
on.
we're moving
We're
on.
gonna move
Okay.
on.
Yeah.
So finish your
Sorry.
thing, then we're gonna move
Okay,
on.
so anyway, back to my statement. Yes, this government is flawed. Yes, NGOs have too much power. Yes, it's annoying when stupid people do stupid things. But at the same time, the right to vote is a human right under a representative democracy in the United States of America. To take that away from voters is not the answer to creating a more educated voting body. Like, just genuinely, it's just not.
Okay, so they're done with the voting thing. Thank goodness, because that was a whole hour on who should or shouldn't have the right to vote. Neither of them got to the actual point, which is why we vote. And the reason we vote is because absent voting, if you didn't like what your government or your king or whatever was doing, it was revolution. The answer was rebellion. It was violent revolution. The reason we try not to disenfranchise people from voting is because voting is the alternative to violent revolution. Neither of them got to this point. Andrew came up with a bunch of ways to limit voting, none of which really would result in only having informed voters. Naima kind of kept harping on this point of, like, she did kind of get him with the like military and civil service thing, like that. It's not only informed and educated people that would perform that task. So just because they gave up 5 years of their life for free room and board to be a civic firefighter or one of the other examples Andrew gave, that doesn't mean that they would become more informed voters at the end. Neither of them got to the actual crux of voting, though. I think that I wish she had known this, because she could have fought back a little better if she had used that point. Yeah, I don't know. That was a long hour for not really any kind of resolution or very much like intelligent back and forth. But we're gonna get to a new topic now. And but that is, you need to add layers to this. Oh yeah, I do a lot of talking. In my opinion, whatever podcast setting up lamp slaughter, yeah, it's very rare that they have like an actually intelligent opposition, and they definitely do that on purpose.
All right, here's what we're gonna do. We have a couple chats that are gonna come.
For example, the other 4 debates that happened this week were a disaster. Well, so I think the election where Joe Biden got elected was rigged. There were a lot of claims made. I think it was like 50 something lawsuits that Trump put forth in different states, and all of them were denied on evidentiary claims, except for one. I don't think that one event was enough, but there are a lot of there's a lot of aspects of that that we can't really know, like how many people, if any, were non-citizen voting, and there were a lot of other different things like that. So I'm honestly not sure. I feel like every election has some rigging in both directions. I don't know if they cancel each other out. It's kind of hard to tell. So I'm kind of like up in the air on that one. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure there's some amount of rigging happening in any election. I just don't know if it's enough to overcome the opposition rigging or if it's enough to turn an entire election. I just don't know. And I don't think anyone really knows on that one.
Through guys, if you want to interact with the stream, the show, the debate,
Let's skip
if you want to
Brian
support
talking.
the slash whatever,
Brian
slash
talking.
whatever.
Wait, he paid $99 to send a message?
Yeah, we have this one coming in from
Damn.
Peacecraft. Oh, the audio's muted. Or actually, it's not muted. I'm not sure why that's not coming
Rick
through.
James.
I'll
I'm
just
Rick
read
James,
it. I have a
bitch.
question for Rick James. If you hadn't eaten breakfast this morning, how would you feel?
The classic can you answer hypothetical questions test.
I think that's for you.
Yeah.
How would you feel if you hadn't?
How would you feel if you hadn't eaten breakfast this morning?
I don't. Just how would I feel?
Yeah.
Hungry, probably.
Okay.
Oh,
All right.
she
And
passed.
we have a message here from Jason Cassell related to the military stuff. Thank you, Jason.
Jason Castle donated $200.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Her boyfriend is an ASVAB waiver. You can't get someone else to take the test. You have to be verified with ID, fingerprints, birth certificate, SS, etc. Also, you take it during MEPS.
Is he very
All right.
right.
Thank you, Jason, for that message.
That's how I remember it. I remember taking it during MEP.
I'm from the UK, so I have no dog in the fight, but I believe after Doge has found 20 million dead people receiving benefits, and then there was 20 million voters missing in the last election. Yeah, it's all very fishy over here. It's all very fishy. I just don't know how much fishiness there was to overcome other fishiness and what like the equal and opposite fishiness was. It's just all very difficult to measure because so much of it is, well, fishy, you know?
In your singular year in the Army? How did you get off with 1 year?
Well, people get hurt.
Oh, well, that sucks.
That's what happens.
You didn't go back?
We have Red Fox here. In the military, 19 years and run MEPS. All applicants take an IQ test. It is called the ASVAB, and we take significant steps to catch fraud. The armed services on average.
Well, I agree that there can be stupid people who are there. I'm just saying that there are standards which are in place. That's one.
Okay, that's the second time there was like a pause jump in this video where like I don't know if a whole line was skipped or something. It's probably nothing, but it's just something to note. I don't know if they're like cutting parts. It doesn't seem like they're cutting long parts, but that's the second time that's happened.
1 and 2. I remember specifically taking it when I was in MEPS. So
how hard would this IQ test be for voters on your whole life?
Well, I didn't really.
Are we gonna
advocate
skip
for
super
an
chats?
IQ
I think we're
test.
gonna
It would
skip
just be- I
super
would-
chats.
You would just be looking for like if somebody was going to enter into service that they had at least the IQ capacity.
Yeah,
to
the IQ testing, we've covered
Let's
that
start
enough.
with
All right.
defining these terms. Can we do that?
Sure, yes.
All right.
So I define feminism, okay, as being a movement towards egalitarianism or equity, okay, with the stated goal of diminishing and eventually destroying patriarchal systems.
That's one definition. It's not everyone's definition, though. That's why I don't like the term feminism. It's just it's too many different contradictory ideas that if you're ever like, I'm a feminist, then you suddenly have all of this baggage you have to defend. And it's like, I don't believe that stuff. I only believe this little part of it. But it's like, it's all like wrapped up in the same term.
Sure.
That seems to be fairly historically accurate and modernly accurate.
Yes, movement towards equity, goal of
Thoughts on Andrew Tate? Oh boy. It's hard to say because Andrew Tate's position has changed dramatically over the years. Before he was doing the whole religious arc, it was kind of just the standard, like, fresh and fit prescription. So I like the men should focus on, being fit, being healthy, focus on money, networking, um, advancing their careers, things like that. The sleeping around and having like some woman as recreational use and stuff like that, I definitely don't agree with. Um, and I mean, now he's doing the whole Muslim thing, and I haven't really kept up with him since then, so I don't really know. He seems to have like changed some positions on some stuff. Uh, he's not my personal cup of tea. We'll say that.
eliminating patriarchal systems.
Yes.
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay, so when I say the word going forward enforcer, what I mean by that word is people who utilize inside of society some form of force or in order to either execute laws, right, or keep people safe in some capacity. That would be an enforcer. Okay. So my argument here is that men ultimately are the enforcement arm of everybody's rights, including other men's, and that women always have to appeal to other men, and so they can't actually get rid of the patriarchy, but must instead comply with the patriarchy.
That is very possible that he did the Muslim thing for protection, especially with all the court cases and stuff that were going around. If he did the things that people have accused him of doing, I'm completely against that stuff. Um, but I would always tell any man, like, yeah, you should go to the gym, you should try to be healthy, and you should try to find a career and a position that puts you in a decent place in life where you can take care of yourself and possibly a family. Um, I personally recommend the trades. Um, I do HVAC during the day specifically. Um, and within like it's 1 year of school, and then if you really work hard and you're good at it, you can be making six figures after 4 years. Um, I don't know about the whole like crypto stuff, but I don't know if he specifically is like a big proponent of crypto. That just might be like tangentially related people that are kind of in the same circles. Um, Now, as for what we're watching, they're doing force doctrine right now, which I have a feeling she's going to get hung up on because this is where they all fall apart.
Okay.
That's my argument.
Sure. Do you want to repeat that for me just so I can take a little note?
Yeah, that women, basically feminists always have to appeal to the patriarchy for rights no matter what. And so feminism isn't even possible. It's not even a possibility.
Okay.
This is true because she just agreed just a minute ago to Andrew's definition of feminism, which included the removal of patriarchal systems from society. There are definitions of feminism that do not require or advocate for the dissolution of patriarchal systems in society. If she had disagreed with Andrew and proposed a counter definition, then she would have a defensible position here. She may have just dug herself into a hole, though. So we'll see. We'll see how she combats this. She's been decent so far. She's done much better than the other four people that he debated this week. They were a disaster. It was bad.
Appeal to patriarchy for it. Okay. So can I ask, do you believe that free will is a privilege? Or a right or a privilege? Do you believe free will is a right or a privilege?
Does free will just mean do whatever you want?
Within the extent that you're not hurting yourself or others or becoming a danger to society.
Well, then, yeah, it sure sounds like you're saying it is.
I'm sorry, what?
Then it would be trivially true that it would have to be if you're saying that.
Why is she going back to the free will thing? Free will is such a nebulous, it's kind of a nonsense term, which we already covered before, so I won't get too into it again, but it's just such a broad, vague term. I don't know. Like Andrew said, yeah, it's like trivially true if you define it that way, that it's like a privilege in the United States, I guess. But it's like, it's such a wacky term that has way too broad of a meaning.
That means you can do whatever you want unless A, B, C, and D, then it would have to be a privilege.
Well, okay. So free will, as I'm defining it, is the right to do with you what you want so long as you are not infringing upon another's free will.
Then it would trivially have to be a privilege.
It would have to be a privilege.
Like by that logic, there would be no way around it. It would have to be a privilege.
Why would it have to be a privilege?
Well, because the second you do infringe on someone's whatever, right?
Yeah.
Do you have free will?
Well, yes, to an extent. Okay, so free will with some limitations. Let's say, is free will with the limitation?
Then it's not free will.
Well, what do you want to call it, Andrew?
I mean, I would just maybe will.
Okay. Do you think that human will is a right or a privilege?
I'm not trying to figure out what you mean by this. Human will.
Like, do you think that we as a society...
How about maybe I can just do it this way? I don't believe that human beings have inherent rights.
Okay. Thank you. There we go. Human beings have no inherent rights.
Excuse me. That's true. Rights are a social construct. They're kind of a nonsense idea. It is a scientific fact that women make choices based on feeling and men logic, which is why the entire podcast is set up to make the other side fail. This is kind of true in generalities, but Brian is very particular about picking specifically like not very intelligent woman. Like it's very rare that he brings on a woman that's like a actual professional debater or someone who really knows what they're talking about. Like he does this intentionally. There are a handful of women in the space that can hold their own against people like Andrew. I think Naima's been doing a much better job than 99% of the women that I've seen on here. She's missing some points still, but she has been at least attempting to come up with like a coherent actual argument against the things that he's been saying, whether they're correct or not. As soon as you drop 10 women and 10 men on a remote island, everyone defaults to type. Yeah, I've seen that experiment before. It doesn't really go very well. It's usually a mess.
Yeah, correct. I think instead, what we call rights are actually just collective intuitions, which are appealed to force, and then force enforces them.
Okay, so all law, are you trying to say that basically all laws are enforced through force or just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
generally?
So all laws ultimately.
All laws are enforced by force. Okay.
Yeah. So if you think about this, the way that I would say is like, do you agree with me that rights themselves are a social construction?
I mean, not really.
So
Oh, what? Is she gonna do like a natural law argument? Because that's just insanity. She has to agree that rights are social constructs. All right, let's see what she's gonna say.
So my right to own a gun is not a social construction.
Yeah, but I'm talking about free will, not like human, like.
What does that? I don't understand though. Like you being able to act in will, I wouldn't dispute with. Like you
Yes,
can.
that's what I'm saying.
You can take actions with your will, but when you say rights, you're saying that those are privileges absent duties. That's a
Okay.
right, and then a duty, right, would be essentially the opposite of what a right is, right?
Yes.
Okay, so these privileges that you're talking about, I think if that's what a right is, a privilege absent a duty, then they all seem like they're privileges.
Okay, but like you don't think that. I guess my issue with this argument is that it's claiming that power is based solely on force.
Yes.
Which to me seems like it's advocating on behalf of violence
I mean,
in order to enforce
in a
and
wo-
maintain
well, yeah,
power.
that's what force would be. Raw force would be violence.
Okay.
So that's what it does. Like we advocate that police be able to use violence in order to enforce laws, right?
But we would prefer that they avoid it, right?
Yeah.
But even if they don't use force, oh, Naima, why? Or Naima, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce her name. I think it's Naima. Even if the police don't use physical force in the moment to enforce the law, the threat of force is what is actually allowing them to not use force in those situations. So even if there isn't like a active physical force present in the specific interaction, it's still based on the idea of force.
Yeah,
Like
but ultimately, what makes people comply? The threat of violence, right?
Exactly.
But there are other ways to get people to comply, no?
Yeah, but what if they don't?
Well, I mean, yes, but I feel like that's a bit of an extreme. Like,
No, it's not a bit of an extreme that people don't comply.
but how does the president have power? He can't threaten violence
That's
against every
all he
single
does.
member.
He is the commander in chief of the United States military.
But he can't threaten so basically, you believe that we function in a society solely because if we don't, we will be violently hurt by the military.
What? No. I believe that that all of your privileges that you have in society that you're calling rights only actually exist because of force, the idea of force and force doctrine, and that is basically 100% men who provide that.
Okay, so you're kind of giving this like might makes right argument.
Just make.
No. Oh, okay. He was about to say it, but it's not might makes right. It's that might makes. It's just a is claim, and it's true. Every right you have, every privilege, everything is enforced by the enforcement arm of society. That's where your rights even come from.
Makes, not makes right.
So just might is right.
No, just makes, not makes right. Right would be a prescriptive ought claim for morality. I'm making a descriptive claim, which is that descriptively might makes.
So do you not believe that violence is immoral?
Of course not. Depends on the circumstance.
You generally just don't believe that violence is immoral.
It depends on the circumstance.
I mean, violence in an attempt to control others and usurp
Again,
their
that depends on
ability.
the circumstance. I think there's plenty of times where you and I would agree that using violence to control others is totally acceptable.
I feel like violence is necessary in self-defense and the
No, you
defense
don't.
of
You think
someone
that
else.
violence is completely acceptable to control prison inmates, probably to execute certain laws and search warrants, to do all sorts of things.
Violence is necessary. Again, those are both actions in self-defense or defense of others.
How is that?
If
when
two
you say,
inmates are fighting,
when you're
and
saying
trying to break
using
up that fight so
yeah
that one of them
violence
doesn't
to
die,
but it's violence to
that would
control
be-
others, right?
but it would be in defense of others.
Yeah, but it's still to control
Yeah, and in defense of one, you're controlling the other one. Yeah, she's falling apart on this one.
others.
It's in
But this happens with all of the any feminist that agrees with the full deconstruction of patriarchy, this is where it falls apart. And it's like, I don't get it, because you can acknowledge patriarchy and the force doctrine and still advocate for women's rights. Like, you don't have to package these things together, because when you try to package these things together, it just doesn't work, because you have to say crazy things like violence is just wrong if you're controlling people, and that's just categorically not true. She doesn't even actually believe that.
In defense of others.
Okay, what if those people, like inmates, don't want to be defended?
So that's what we're talking about. Well, I mean, if someone is beating another person to death, I'm sure that the person
If
who's
it's mutual
dying,
combat, they both want to do it. The guards then go and break it up. They're
They want
definitely
to
using
die?
violence for control. Not die, but fight.
Okay, but if someone is beating someone else to death, and you are
Yeah,
using
but that's
violence
not.
to prevent
See,
that, then
you
you're
see
using
how
violence.
you negate the claim, so you move to the next claim. Can
not
two
negating the
people
claim.
be fighting and then you use violence to break that up?
Yes.
Okay, great. So then you can use violence to control people, and it's perfectly acceptable.
It's not acceptable though, because it's the reason it's acceptable is because it's in defense of another person.
Those people want to fight. Who are you defending?
If one of them is dying, or if one of them is
One
very
of them
badly
is not
hurt,
dying. They
you are
just
defending.
want to fight. They're not dying, but they just want to fight.
Okay, sure. So 2 prison inmates. But again, you're using these like really, really, really stringently specific.
Yeah, because if we go too broad and too general, then if we hone it down, then I can negate your stance, because what you're saying doesn't actually make logical sense.
But you're honing it down to a specific example that is not representative of the entire population of the United States. I feel like we should use an example
What
that
is
less-
representative of the entire population of the
I have absolutely no idea what that sentence she just said means. I have no idea.
not
United
2
States?
prisoners who choose to fight to the death.
Well, what
I mean,
is-
that's the furthest thing
No,
from
no,
the truth.
but when you make a claim, you make this claim. You say, Andrew, violence is only just, or violence isn't justified to control groups of people. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't really believe that, because I can give you examples of groups of people who you would want to control with violence, and you think it's totally acceptable. And you're like, yeah, that's true.
Well, those people have
Hey,
lost
but
the
hang
right
on,
to
but
free
hang
will
on.
by committing
But
a
hang
crime.
on, you go, yeah, that's true, but, right, I still now don't want to use that example. It's like, that makes no sense. It's a refutation to your position. That's why I hone in on it.
Okay, so people, we know this through the Constitution, essentially relinquish their right to free will by threatening the free will of others. That's why prisoners are allowed to go to jail, and that is constitutionally accepted. Yes.
Say that. Let me make sure I got that right.
Yeah, but you're still controlling people. This doesn't make any sense. This whole line of, oh, I wish they would just acknowledge force doctrine and then get to the next point. Every single person that debates this gets totally caught up on this. And if they just had a little bit of like a understanding of philosophy, they could work their way around this. Yeah, it's ideologically driven. It's totally like, I need this outcome, so I've worked my way backwards to my argument. And that's not how it works. Like, that's not how functional ideas work. You can't start with a conclusion and work your way backwards. It doesn't work. And she's exemplifying that right now.
Right. Say that again.
People essentially relinquish their right to free will, the right to walk around and be free in society as a prisoner, because they have committed a crime that is a danger to themselves or others and threatens
That's
the
incorrect.
fabric of society. So
No.
why do people go to jail? Why are crimes crimes? Why are things that are bad?
People go to jail because we force them into jail after they commit crimes, not because they're willingly going to jail for
I
their
understand that they're
crimes.
not willingly going to jail, but what I'm saying is the forced relinquishment of free will in this instance is morally acceptable because they have committed a crime that threatens themselves or others.
Yeah, I'm not disputing whether or not it's moral. That would
Yes.
make my point for me, though.
So I'm not trying to talk about those who have already had their free will relinquished on the basis that they have committed a crime that threatens themselves or others. I'm trying to talk about people who are not criminals, who have not relinquished their free will, who are here in this country and deserve the right to choose what they do with themselves and their bodies. Now,
Okay. Well, I mean, you're making a
to-
lot of suppositions there that I just kind of like don't agree with.
So you don't think that people deserve the right to bodily autonomy?
No.
What makes someone deserve
Oh, neither do you, Naima. You don't believe that.
the right to bodily autonomy?
Well, when you say bodily autonomy, yeah, would you agree then that a fetus has bodily autonomy?
I'm talking right now about human beings.
Well, I consider those human beings, though.
I'm talking right now about people who can talk and walk, who are independent, singular organisms.
So people who are in comas, they have no rights?
Dude, you keep doing comas and prisoners and fetuses. Just talk about a fucking person. What about
that
you
is a
and me?
person.
Just talk about a person who is not an exception, who is not in a medical state of physical.
Yeah, but what we're trying to determine right now is the worldview. You say people deserve to have bodily autonomy. And then you give me the criteria for bodily autonomy, and then I can instantly point to an example where you agree
That's
that
not what we're trying to do. What you're trying to do
What am I
is
trying to
create
do?
a gotcha so you don't have to answer the genuine question that I'm asking.
What's the
you.
genuine question you're asking?
The question is, do people, regardless of outliers,
Mm-hmm.
does the average person who has not committed a crime, who is not inside of another person, who is not brain dead or in a coma, deserve bodily autonomy?
Depending on what you mean by that.
Bodily autonomy being defined as the ability to choose what you do with your body so long as you are not threatening other people's bodily autonomy.
No.
Why not?
Because I would say that things like laws against unaliving yourself would be completely appropriate and things like this, which would be a violation of your bodily autonomy by your criteria.
So you think that because people can't unalive themselves?
No, I'm saying you gave me the criteria for what bodily autonomy means, right? You asked me what an objection would be against it, and I just gave you one.
Okay, so let's cut out that outlier. Do you think that people who are not inside another person, who have not committed a violent crime against themselves or others, and who are not currently brain dead and are conscious and capable of perceiving the world, do you think that those people deserve bodily autonomy?
No, based on the
Why
example
not?
I just gave you.
Just because people have the capacity to unalive themselves, no one deserves bodily autonomy.
By the definition that you just gave, we could not give them bodily autonomy definitionally by that definition because
Definitely by that definition.
definitionally by that definition, yes. So I could say definitionally by some other definition, but I'm giving you the referent to your definition.
We don't deserve bodily autonomy.
Not by your
because-
definition, because that would prevent us from preventing people from like doing suicide and things like this.
So we don't deserve bodily autonomy because under my definition of bodily autonomy, we cannot prevent someone from killing themselves.
Correct.
But that's not a violent act. Like why
Yeah,
can't-
that's a real
but why
violent
can't-
act.
Why can't, under my definition, you can't prevent someone from killing themselves?
Because it would violate your rule for what bodily autonomy is.
I said so long as you are not a threat to yourself or others. So that includes you. So you would relinquish your bodily autonomy if you were a threat to yourself.
Then I think that it would then just be trivially true that you don't really mean bodily autonomy anymore, because what you do is you say bodily autonomy with all of these exceptions where we can violate bodily autonomy.
But that's like 3 exceptions. It's exceptions that
It's not like 3 exceptions,
Exist.
it's many exceptions. What about somebody who's just like cutting themselves with a razor blade? Can we stop them? What about a person who just says that they want to cut off their right arm because they think it'll be fun? Can we stop them? Like, there's so many examples I can give you of where we would violate people's bodily autonomy. What about a person who's having like a manic episode and doesn't want to go to the hospital? Can we violate their bodily autonomy?
well, they're a threat to themselves or others. So again, that would fall in there.
What if they're not a threat? What if they're just having like a manic episode? They don't want to leave their house. You just perceive it
well,
that way.
happens all the time. Those are homeless
Exactly.
people,
So
and they do have
we
bodily
violate
autonomy.
that whatever you consider by your definition bodily autonomy. When you say do people deserve that, and I say absolutely not by that definition, because I can point to 300 different reasons why we would need to violate
So
it.
is there any definition of bodily autonomy that you think that a
Not that I'm
human
aware
being-
of. I'm not aware of a definition of bodily autonomy I would agree to that I wouldn't think we should be able to violate.
So you don't think that people should have the ability to control themselves and their bodies under any circumstance because
I
there
didn't
are...
say under any circumstance.
So what's the circumstance in which people should have the right to control their body?
Yeah, so, well, for me, I would say that if it's in some type of case of will, that you could do that. But I mean, ultimately,
You mean
I
like
think.
free will?
Yeah, no, in case of will. So I'm not sure that I believe in some universalized right for bodily autonomy. And you haven't really given me.
And she's, neither does she. Like, if there's 40 billion exceptions, then you don't believe in it either. And it's kind of like a nonsense idea to begin with. Like, yeah, we have some level of bodily autonomy, but it's not like universal and all encompassing. No one would ever actually think that.
Any definitional reason why I should.
But
here.
I don't understand why you don't believe in bodily autonomy. Why don't you believe in
Because
bodily
my
why don't
understanding
people
of
have
what
the right to
bodily
control themselves?
autonomy is that you basically have the right to do whatever you want absent the infringement of somebody else's bodily autonomy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why don't you think people should
Because
have the right
I
to do
think that I need to many times infringe on people's bodily autonomy for their good or societies.
that? Why are you constantly infringing on other people's bodily autonomy? What are you up
What
to?
do you mean?
What you just said, I feel the need to...
Yeah, well, I would use force doctrine for that, meaning voting, things
so
like that,
when
to violate
when
bodily
are you
autonomy.
when are you forcing
When I
yourself
go
onto others
vote.
to bodily...
I'm forcing my will when I go vote on other people through force doctrine.
No, you're not, because they all have a vote.
Great, can I vote
mean,
it-
not according to
okay.
you, but...
I can vote and you can vote, right?
Yes.
Okay, you want abortions to be legal?
Yes.
If I vote against that, am I voting against your bodily autonomy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we move on now?
No, we can't move on now.
No,
because
we
you still
can't move on?
haven't
Okay.
Well, Andrew, you still haven't explained why humans don't deserve bodily autonomy. Like,
Oh, he just did, though. Come on. You're smarter than this. I think you're smarter than this. I might be wrong. You seemed smarter than this at the beginning of the conversation.
what are
I
you
just
saying?
explained it to you.
So then who should control people?
I
Who should
well,
control
in
people?
this case, we would use groupings of laws under, and from my view, it would be like Christian ethics. From your view, it would be like, I don't know, shared bizarre intuitions or whatever, where you think that, I don't know, well, I don't know where
Why
it
are
is that
guessing
you,
what I believe? Stop
do
it.
you believe in God?
I'm on the fence about
Then
it.
it's just intuition. So everything that you believe is probably just
So
intuition.
you believe, well, I mean, there's also facts and like physical evidence.
There are refutations to this, but they're really, really complicated, and she definitely doesn't have the philosophical background to make them. She's gonna flounder through this entire force doctrine thing. I mean, she already has.
But so you believe
Facts and physical evidence require an interpreter, right?
like eyes and ears.
They
and a brain?
require you to interpret them.
So you're saying that facts are different for everyone, regardless of how they interpret.
Well, they require an interpreter, and the interpreter can interpret them however they choose, and then can make moral prescriptions based on those. But when we get to the moral prescriptions,
Facts don't change based on your.
but your
personal
moral
perspective.
prescriptions based on the facts do. That's
Okay,
why they're
sure.
they require interpreters. So I'm not really willing to kind of cede the
Every
ground.
fact, but you are
Yeah.
your own personal interpreter now.
Yeah, I interpret things correct. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, and so do I. That's.
Yeah, I
how
know, but I
facts
just
work.
don't.
We
I-
all see
but I-
facts, and then we make
Yeah,
our
right,
own
but I
conscious
haven't-
judgments about those facts.
Right, but I have an
based on how
epistemic
our brains work.
foundation that I appeal to for foundational morals. You don't. You would
So
just
you think
appeal
that
to
everyone should
intuition.
have to subscribe to the Christian God, and that is who decides who has free will?
I think that Christian ethics.
I'm confused as to what that
We're
has
not
to do with
even.
Okay, that's the third time that's happened. Just like a random jump skip in the middle of the, like, what is Brian cutting out?
We weren't talking about free will.
Okay, so then what
We're talking about bodily autonomy now.
Okay, so then based on
Your definition of bodily autonomy,
Yes.
the one that you gave me,
Sure.
we would definitely need to violate it, and you even agree to that. So
And what? Just for abortion or what?
no, for the purpose of like suicide, cutting yourself with razor blades, all sorts of various things that you could do to yourself for self-harm that we would step in and violate your bodily autonomy over.
Okay, so outside of those specific examples in which someone is committing an act of harm, which I also removed from my definition of bodily
Then
autonomy.
I don't consider that bodily autonomy anymore by your definition. Your
Okay.
definition would have to be something
Dude,
different
like the
than
right
your
to go to
definition.
the fucking grocery store. Who has that right? Who are you saying under your standpoint of government, what is it based on your equal force objection
So-
can women do
Yeah.
that they should not be allowed
So
to
let's
do?
untangle some ideas. When you say who has a right to go to a grocery store, who has an inherent right to go to a grocery store, or who has a physical right enforced by men to go to a grocery store? Which thing are you asking?
What do you
An inherent right or some external subjective right?
Well, there's no such thing as inherent rights. So if she answers inherent rights, then she already lost this line also.
That is enforced. Which thing are you asking?
I'm saying who has an inherent right to
Nobody.
move their body in the way that
Nobody.
they
Nobody has an inherent right to do anything.
Nobody.
Nobody has an inherent right to do anything.
So then how do we gain the physical right to go to the grocery store?
Through force.
Exclusively through force.
Yeah, the only reason that, like, so if, like, let's say the Taliban took over, the grocery store area, do you have the right to go to the grocery store now?
No, but that's an
Then
anarchic
what?
society.
Then you're agreeing with me. So then you're
I'm
saying
not
there's
agreeing
no
with you.
inherent right.
It sounds like you're advocating for anarchy, and the only way that
I'm
people
not advocating
gain a
for
right-
anarchy.
The only way that people gain a right is through force. Then we'd all be fighting each other all the time.
No, see, she is making a natural rights argument, which would actually be the libertarian anarchist argument. He's doing the opposite.
To gain the right to just
No,
use
we
our
don't.
bodies
You can
in a basic way.
cooperate for the purpose of force doctrine. We do it constantly. What do you mean?
No, we don't, because we don't live under a force doctrine principle.
Yes, we do.
Well, how would old people have the power to do anything? How would disabled people have the power
Because
to do
they
anything?
have-
If no one can defend themselves
Because they
through
have
force.
people who have force, which enable them to do those
What?
things. That's how.
So then there is power that comes not from force. If people who do not have the power to force can utilize the strength of others on their behalf.
The strength of others would be force.
Okay, but how did that person at the top who doesn't have force utilize the strength of others?
He's utilizing other people's force.
Okay, but what is he doing to utilize their force? Because he somehow has power over them. How?
He doesn't have, well, it's agreed to power. But the thing about power dynamics, which is interesting, is that if you have control over force, if that were to shift, like let's say the president said some shit that you really didn't like, and a big ass mob showed up to take him out, right? And nobody opposed that, who has force doctrine on their side?
That's fair. So I want to go back to this claim. You said
Hang on.
agreed to-
Before we go back to
No,
my claim,
You said agreed
hang
to
on.
powers
I want
based
to
on force.
wait.
And I would like to just ask.
Hang on. You said that's
if-
fair, though, right? You said that's fair.
No,
You said that's fair.
I'm responding to the words you're saying. If you said agreed to power based on force,
Yeah.
and that those who are disabled are protected and their will is protected, and those who are elderly are protected and their will is
If
protected.
there's force, yeah.
Then why can't you do the same thing with women? Why do women now usurp their right to protection and bodily autonomy under a
There's not rights.
force
These aren't
action.
rights. It's just force. Can
It is a right.
Can women like manipulate men to use force on their behalf? Sure, that's
Yeah.
happened before.
Okay.
Great. But they're always going to have to appeal to men's strength for force, no matter what.
But I don't think society is intrinsically and implicitly governed by force, and I think advocating for that
Which
is
part
creating
of society?
more violence.
Which part of society is not governed by force? Which part?
I mean, schools aren't governed by
Yes,
force.
they're
People
governed
go to
by force,
school
for
because
sure.
Really? So kids go to school because they're afraid they're going to get.
No, they're not going
hurt
to
and
school
beat
because they're
up if
afraid
they
they're
don't
going to
go
get
to-
hurt. But there's security guards who are around. There's police officers who are around. There's people who enable that nothing bad's going to happen to those kids. There's teachers who are there much stronger than the students to keep potential threats away from the students. All of it's governed by force.
Okay, but you're talking about force for protection versus
Yeah.
force for the utilization and monopoly of
It's
power.
all the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
Same.
If you're protecting people's right to be somewhere, then that is a different use of force than.
But they're both force?
Sure.
Okay, great. Then they're the same thing. Force.
Sure. But
Okay,
why are you, just because you have a monopoly on force, what gives you the will to usurp someone's right to very basic bodily autonomy?
They don't have rights. Rights are not, by your agreement, inherent.
So then what's to stop a bigger, stronger man from just beating the shit out of you? And now you don't have rights.
Nothing except force doctrine. That's the whole point.
Then why would you want to live in a society in which everyone is like
I didn't say
dependent
you
on
have to
force?
live in a society in which individuals can get beaten up by somebody who's next to
But
them.
that's what force doctrine is.
No, force doctrine would be like the cops would show up and beat that guy down with billy clubs, drag his ass to prison. Then he would get thrown in a prison where guards would make sure he stayed there.
Okay, so
that's
what
all
kind of force is appropriate through force doctrine?
Well, I don't even know what that means. What are you asking?
So the force and the power to, I mean, you're basically saying that women do not have the right to, I don't know because you won't define what rights are, to do really anything.
Okay,
because
I'll tell you
men
again.
can-
What did I say a right is? A duty. Oh, I'm sorry, a privilege absent a duty, and you agreed to it 4 times.
So women have no privilege
Hang on,
absent of a duty.
Stop. I just want to point out your lie. You said I
So frustrated.
you said I keep lying, or you keep lying. So
When
like,
did I lie, Bookie?
You just lied and said that he wouldn't define what a right is. And now you're like cackling and acting crazy for no reason.
you just said I never defined privilege.
No, I didn't.
Yes,
Oh,
you
yeah.
literally just said that, and I defined it 4 times.
You didn't say you didn't define privilege. You didn't define privilege. You defined a right.
Oh
Those
my
are
God,
different words.
a privilege absent duty is what?
A privilege absent of a duty. I'd say like free will.
A right.
essentially.
It's
Yeah.
a right. I defined it multiple times.
So what are you trying to say? That because women cannot defend physically their right to do things, that they do not deserve rights? Is that the point?
They can't enforce their own rights. So they
Okay,
have to
so
appeal to
because
men.
someone cannot enforce their own rights, they don't deserve rights.
Well, they don't have them.
But do they deserve them?
Well, again, then you're moving into a different claim. So if you want to get into like what people deserve or don't deserve, right? We can get into that, but can we at least agree on the descriptor of how it works first?
No.
Okay.
Because women, I'm trying to understand why women don't deserve rights because they cannot
That's
physically.
a different claim.
That's geez, does she not understand the difference between is and ought claims? He's explained it so many times.
I just asked you if we could agree to the descriptor before we moved to that claim, and you said no, and then brought that claim up again.
Because the claim doesn't make sense. I don't understand your claim.
Okay,
Make the claim,
and I'm
then we can
literally
debate it.
answering all of your questions for this claim.
Not well, though. Like, what are you saying?
Which question? Which thing am I not answering?
If women do not have a monopoly on force, cannot control their own bodies, why don't they deserve basic human rights, basic equal rights?
Okay, let's try this again. It's like
Okay.
talking to a fucking child. Okay, do you agree with me?
No.
Okay. Do you agree with
I've
me?
never seen you this pissed off. This is fucking hilarious. Oh my
I'm
Oh my God, you are not dunking on him right now. You look insane right now.
not pissed off. I'm just.
Yes, you are. And they
No.
say women are emotional. Look at him.
You're the one freaking out, not me.
I'm not freaking out. I think this is hilarious.
For me, it's extremely frustrating talking to someone who doesn't
That
actually
sounds like an
understand
emotion.
the words that are coming out of my
You're
mouth.
sounding very emotional right now, Andrew.
Can we go
Would
back?
you like to get some water?
Yeah, can we go back and go through all
If you need
of
to cry, that's
these-
okay.
Can we go back
I'm
through?
here for you, my friend.
Can we go back through these descriptors now?
Sure.
Okay.
Alrighty.
What is a
You
right?
just want to keep defining words?
What is a
Fucking
right?
Merriam-Webster over here.
What is a right from your perspective?
Okay. I mean, I'm fine with your definition on those descriptors.
No, but I want your definition.
I'm fine with your definition of
Then why do you keep contradicting yourself if you're fine with my
that.
definition?
I'm not contradicting myself. Your claim just doesn't make sense that humans do not deserve rights specifically because they
He hasn't made that claim at all. He never made that claim. Not one time.
cannot physically
When did I
defend
say
them.
they didn't deserve them?
You just did, like
I said
4
they
times.
don't exist inherently, right?
Okay, so whether or not it doesn't exist inherently, does someone still deserve that right? Just
They
because
don't.
they cannot
they-
physically defend themselves.
How do you deserve something that doesn't exist?
But it does exist.
Okay, so now it exists. Does it exist or not exist?
I mean, do I have bodily autonomy currently? Yes. Can I go walk around my house and do what I want? Yes. So on a certain level, it does exist.
Where?
I mean, right here, right now. I'm here on my own free will.
So because you can do this,
pissing you the fuck off.
so because you can do this, you have the right to do this?
I'm trying to see what extent you think women should not be allowed to do things because they cannot monopolize and control
Yeah, but
others based
do
on
you
force.
understand that, like,
I just don't understand practically what
Yeah.
you want out of this.
When
So
you-
women can't force men.
It's hard to argue with you because you don't have any understanding of philosophy at all. So when I bring these things up,
That's not the issue. The
You
issue
That is the issue. That is 100% the issue. 100%.
is that your
agree-
philosophy is
you
inherently
agree-
flawed. It's
you-
on a. It morally doesn't make sense.
okay, I'll tell you what. Negate it. Negate the proposition.
Okay, sure. With what I said before. So you're basically saying that people who utilize force to execute laws are those who have the ability to control those laws. My issue is that, and in terms of a movement towards equity or a goal of eliminating, and in terms of feminism, you're saying it's a movement towards equity with the goal of eliminating patriarchal systems. My issue is that I fundamentally do not believe that laws should be exclusively enforced to the benefit of those who have physical power.
Okay. That's not a negation of force doctrine. So, like, I don't know what to. You're so philosophically illiterate that you actually don't even understand what I'm saying to you.
And you're just regularly illiterate. I mean, dude, like, then just argue the claim.
I did argue the claim.
But it doesn't make sense.
Then falsify it.
Okay, just because someone can do something does not mean that they ought to do it.
Okay, so
just
then
because men
descriptively-
can force women to do what they want doesn't mean that they ought
So
to.
then descriptively, do you agree with force doctrine?
I mean, I believe on a blanket, I believe on like a smaller level. I think that interpersonally, someone can use force if they have more force over someone.
Okay, let's try this. What is
Yeah.
force doctrine?
Force doctrine is your whole thing that men have a monopoly on force and human beings have no inherent rights. All laws are enforced by force and violence is used to maintain societal regularity on a certain level.
And that women have to appeal to men for their monopoly on force in order to secure their whatever needs or rights or whatever it is they want, right? That's part of force doctrine?
Sure, yeah,
Okay, do you
by your
agree?
definition.
Then do you agree with the description? Do you agree the
Yes.
description is
I
true?
already said I agreed with the description. That's why
I
I want to
asked
argue
you
your
4
claim.
times if you agreed with the description
And
of
I
force
said
doctrine.
I agreed with it 4 times. Well, one time I said no to piss you off, but then
Okay.
the other times I said yes.
So you agreed with me that when it comes to force doctrine, you agree to the descriptor being true.
Sure.
Okay, now we can get somewhere maybe.
That's what I said. Oh
All
my
right.
God.
I mean, you never did, but okay.
I did, Andrew.
So now that we can get past that, now that you've agreed to force doctrine, can you tell me why men should enforce women's rights?
Why men should enforce women's rights. I don't necessarily think that. I think that free will is honestly a privilege. I mean, not a privilege. I think that free will is a right.
It has literally absolutely nothing to do with what he just asked you.
I think that everyone
Well,
has
then-
the right to bodily autonomy.
Then you don't agree to force doctrine. Why'd you lie to me? Why did
I
you lie to
agreed
me?
You asked me if I agreed with your definition. I
Yeah.
agree with your definition of it. I don't morally agree with it. That's
Well,
what
if
I'm
we
saying.
don't agree with the descriptor, then we have to argue the descriptor until you
Yes.
either falsify the descriptor or agree with the descriptor. It can't be either or. It has to be either or. It can't be anything else. It's either true or it's false.
I just want to understand your moral justification for controlling someone else's body. I'm talking on a moral basis, not that you can't physically. I understand that you can physically. I agree with the premise.
That's nice,
I want
but
you
I
to
asked
defend
you.
why
but I asked,
morally
but I
this
asked
is
you a
acceptable.
question, and he didn't answer it. Why should men enforce women's rights? Why should they?
Because it is morally unacceptable to control others. It is morally impermissible
That's
to
the
control
opposite.
others.
You're not controlling. If you're enforcing their rights, it sounds like they're controlling you, right? Like, how are you controlling them by enforcing their rights?
But right is simply, as we've defined it,
Yeah.
a privilege without a
so
duty.
why should men enforce women's privileges?
But they don't have to. So what are you defining as a
Answer my
privilege?
question. Why should men enforce women's privileges?
They don't have to enforce women's privileges.
Great. Great. I believe the exact same thing. Perfect. I'm
But
going to go have
you
a smoke.
don't have to enforce. Oh my goodness, he's upset.
He's coming back. He's just gonna.
He's upset because you don't understand basic day one philosophy.
Do a little
Rage
smoke.
All right.
quit.
Are
I've
you
got him.
kidding?
All right, we're going to skip ahead a little bit because Andrew leaves and then she leaves. And then there's more super chats confronting Andrew's past. I don't know. The source of her morals. We're going to start up again here. Because it's a very long debate, and we're not going to watch all of the rest of it. Because I think we kind of get... I think we kind of get where this is going at this point. She had some good arguments in the voting section of the debate, but she's completely lost the plot with this one. And this is where it always falls apart.
So Kantian ethics, you're a universalist ethicist, you're a deontologist?
No, I wouldn't say. Honestly, I feel like neither consequentialism nor deontological ethics like fully encapsulate.
So you're a threshold deontologist?
I don't know. I think there's merit to both arguments.
Okay, so what do you
But
base
if
your
we would like
morality on?
to- I think I base my morality on physically how you are impacting other people. If you are hurting
That would be
others,
consequences.
Sure, but intent does play kind of a part in consequences.
That would be consequences as well. So if I have the intent to do good things and bad things happen to you, you'd say I shouldn't be doing those good things to you, right?
No, that's why I'm saying I think that there's a gray area between consequentialism and deontological.
So threshold deontology. So,
Sure.
Okay, great. So you're a threshold deontologist. Can you tell me what you base that on other than your own personal perspective?
Do you not believe that it's immoral?
It's not
to
my
hurt
turn
other
to
people?
answer questions. Your turn for the internal critique.
Do you not believe it? Well, I believe it's
answer-
immoral to hurt other people. It is inherently wrong to hurt others. And
What
that's-
makes it inherently wrong?
Well, hurting other people is not. You think that's good?
That's just you making the claim and then it's called question begging. It's a question begging fallacy. When
Your question
when
begging.
I say,
you continue to add.
do you even know?
Even using the term inherently in an argument is just so off base. Like, you can't just say, oh, it's inherent. Like, that's not an argument.
You know
You're
what
going to
question
good
begging
questions.
means? What does it mean?
Oh my God, Andrew.
What does it mean?
You're trying to catch me in a logical
What does
fallacy
it
by
mean?
I'm answering. You're trying to catch me in a logical fallacy.
That's
by
not
asking me a
answering.
big
What does it mean?
question begging. You're trying to catch
what
your
does
opponent.
it mean? It doesn't mean you're trying to catch your opponent. That's not what
That's
question begging
not-
means.
Will you let me finish?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's it mean?
You're trying to catch your opponent in a logical fallacy by asking them questions that inherently create a dissonance.
What the fuck are you talking about? That is not what the question begging fallacy is.
So then how do you define it?
It's not a definitional thing. It's a fallacious thing. When I ask you, is this inherent? You say, listen, it's inherent because it's inherent. It's inherent because it's inherent.
That's not what I said.
Great. What makes it inherent? What makes your morals inherent? What makes not hurting somebody else being bad inherent?
You don't think that hurting other people
That's
is bad?
asking me a question, not answering it. What makes hurting other people bad inherent?
Inherently, you are denying them the right to their bodily autonomy.
Yeah, but what makes that bad?
It's bad because it's hurting them. Hurting
Yeah,
someone
but
is
what
physically
makes
bad.
that bad?
You don't think that hurting something
That's
someone is
asking
bad?
me a question, not answering it.
It's bad because it's immoral.
It's bad because it's bad. Now you have done a circular, fallacious argument.
Sure.
What is bad? This thing over here that's bad. What makes it bad? The fact that it's bad. Why is it bad? Because it's bad? Is that why it's bad?
You sound like a
Is
cat
it
in the hat.
bad because it's bad because it's bad?
It is inherently wrong to hurt other people.
Yeah, what makes it inherently wrong to hurt other people?
It is inherently wrong to hurt other people because you are denying them their free will, you are causing them physical pain,
Mm-hmm.
and you are participating and exacerbating in suffrage
Yeah,
and
what
suffering.
what makes that bad though?
You don't think that causing other
That's
people to suffer
asking
is
me
bad.
a question. Asking me what makes it bad doesn't describe for me what makes it bad.
Hurting someone is bad
Because
because you are denying them their right
yeah,
to
but
free
what
will
makes that part bad?
and perpetuating
Yeah,
suffering.
but what makes that part bad?
You don't think that suffering is bad.
No, that has nothing to do with what I think.
It does have
Here's
everything to do with what
here's
you-
how this
you think.
conversation's going, just so you know. I'm
Sure.
like, is eating candy bars bad? And you're like, it's bad. I say, what makes eating candy bars bad? And you
It's
say, well, because
unhealthy.
it's unhealthy for you. And I say, but why is being unhealthy bad? And you say, because eating candy bars is bad.
You are causing physical harm.
Okay,
You
so
are disrupting society.
so eating a donut is immoral?
I'm not talking about candy bars anymore.
Is eating a
I'm talking about
donut
your
immoral?
initial
Is eating a
statement.
donut immoral?
No, because you're not causing a physical harm
You're
to anyone
causing
else.
physical harm?
To someone else. It is an exercise
So
of
is
your free
making
will.
donuts immoral?
No.
But even if people are going to eat them and it causes them harm?
But eating one donut is not going to cause someone physical harm.
Yeah, but if
you
there's
eat a donut in excess, then that causes someone physical harm. But that is not something that you are policing. If you make donuts
So-
and then force someone to buy and eat 10
Got it.
donuts in front of you, then that
Okay.
would be causing a physical harm.
When you say the word inherently, what you mean is something which is like based inside the human experience? What do you mean by inherently?
I mean, on an instinctual level, does it not
Instinctual.
hurt someone to cause harm? Although, of course, there are people
I'm just
who
asking
are
what do
sociopaths
you
and
mean
don't
by
feel that.
inherently?
I mean inherently as in on a very basic, it is a fact, inherent fact.
Oh, there's no such thing as an inherent fact. All right, I'll be right back. All right. Here we go again. This is getting painful. She's just getting trapped in the same circle now of this whole concept of something just being inherent, and it's just not an argument. Nothing is inherent.
Fact.
Inherently, it means it's a fact.
I'm just saying
Ugh.
inherently as in it is implicit throughout every culture. Well, not every culture, but like it's implicit.
Okay, inherently means implicit. So it means always, like always something. It's inherent. It's like always this thing. Is that what that means?
I'm getting confused. What the fuck are you talking about?
I'm asking you what inherently means.
Why don't we just Google it? Why am I'm not married.
I'm actually okay with you. If you want to
Yeah,
Google
can
the
we Google
definition
it?
of inherent,
Yes,
yeah,
thank
Brian
you.
can pull it up. I'm not trying to get a got you on the definition. I just want the definition.
Okay, yeah, then let's pull it up.
Existing in something as a permanent, essential, or
Like always.
characteristic
That's what I said.
attribute.
I said always.
So I just want to make sure. Hang on.
Yeah.
Existing. Read the rest of it.
There's a few others. Do you want
Just the first
Just
one's
the first
fine.
one.
Okay, existing in something as a permanent, essential, or characteristic attribute.
So it is a permanent attribute from your view that hurting somebody else is bad.
Yes.
Why?
Because you are causing them physical harm, which is a disruption to social order.
Why is that bad though?
Well, because you would have no social order, you would not be able to progress as a society, and physical harm is painful. You are causing someone pain. It is bad to cause someone
So
pain.
yeah.
I think that's an
But you
inherent
just
fact.
do you understand like what you keep saying is it's bad because it's bad.
Well, it's causing a
because it's
negative.
bad because it's bad.
You are taking something away from someone,
Mm-hmm.
which is their physical, like, just capability. and
So
existence.
if it were the case
Yes.
that most of society believed that enslavement was fine because it was inherent that some people were allowed to own other people, would that be bad?
But that's not an inherent truth.
Well, what makes physically hurting someone else an inherent truth?
Physically hurting someone else is an inherent truth because you are denying them bodily autonomy and the ability to control what happens to their body, and you are causing a net negative to that person.
Yeah, but you haven't actually told me why that part of that is bad, though.
Causing a net negative to others is bad on every single moral, like, as a Christian, you should know why hurting other people is bad.
I know why Christians think so. I don't know why you think so.
I think so because, again, you're robbing them of their bodily autonomy.
Yeah, but you don't tell me why that's actually bad. So you start, this is what makes it question begging. You start with the assumption as the conclusion. You start with the premise as a conclusion. Hurting people is bad because it's bad to hurt people.
Yes.
That's your position?
No, I'm saying hurting people is bad because you are robbing them of their physical autonomy and you are creating a net negative to another person.
So if you could hurt people collectively in some way and it causes good outcomes, would that be bad?
Yes.
Well, then you just negated what makes it bad.
Well, that's because I'm not a consequentialist.
Then why are you making the claim that this is bad if even the good results are still bad?
But it's not a good result if you are hurting people at a net negative. If it is a net negative, then it is not good. If hurting people is a universal net negative to those people, and the more people you hurt, the more negative it is, then hurting people in that instance is also bad.
What makes it a net negative, though?
Physically harming someone is negative to them. You are causing pain, which is a negative to them.
Okay, and do you agree that there's some groups who maybe have negative outlooks that you need to cause pain to?
If they are hurting other people and the negative of those people is outweighing the negative of hurting them, then potentially.
What if they just refuse to comply?
But that's why, like, going back to the force theory, that's why force is used in some situations to control others. And it is used immorally when it is not controlling someone who is putting a net negative.
I want to tell you about a little island called Papua New Guinea.
Oh boy. Okay, I know where he's going with this. The problem here is that she's trying to have like normative debate, and the only reason she's trying to do that is because she doesn't have a philosophical background or like even just a day one understanding of philosophy. But you can't do that with Andrew. He won't let you do that. You have to be able to go all the way back to like the foundation of where your conclusion comes from, or he won't move on in the conversation. So from his Christian worldview, he would have answers for all of these things from the Christian perspective. There are ways to attack that, but she clearly doesn't know any of them, or even where her own beliefs come from. It's bad because it's bad, unless it's good, because it's less bad, because things are bad unless they're less good or less bad. It's just nonsense. He's about to talk about a crazy tribe in Papua New Guinea that does weird stuff, though.
Oh, God.
On this little island called Papua New Guinea, there's a tribe called the Cum Warriors of Papua New Guinea. You might think I'm making this up. I'm not.
No, I feel like I've heard of this before.
This isolated tribe in Papua New Guinea, what they enjoy doing is, well, they have the yits of the tribe, the younglings, who are male, go over and blow all of the adults, essentially, the yits. They go over and, like, service them, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what they do.
Yeah.
However, when psychologists go and look at this, the kids there actually demand to do this because it's a part of their culture. Now, me as a Christian, I would say that's inherently bad.
Right.
Why would you? What basis could you have to justify if there's no negative outcome, which is what you're saying bad is?
If there's no negative outcome, well, there is a negative outcome.
They are demanding to do it.
Yeah, but psychologically, pedophilia does have an inherently negative outcome.
Well, PDF.
Even if
Let's say PDF.
Oh, right. Sorry.
But on top of that, right, even when you say that, the psychologist said that they were demanding to do this. It's part of their cultural right. They're demanding it. They don't want to not be adults in the culture. Me as a Christian, I would go in there and put an end to that fucking shit in 1 second. I would bring my military in there and I would kick them on the fucking ground and I'd take those kids out of there and I'd be like, fuck that. A tribe like that doesn't even deserve to exist. That's what I would do.
Okay.
Okay? But from your perspective, why is that bad?
From
If
my
there's no
perspective-
psychological damage, they're demanding to do it. Why is that bad?
Yeah, I don't really know, honestly. I'll concede that one.
Oh, she didn't just concede that one. She just conceded the whole last hour is what she just conceded. The entire last hour of this debate, she just conceded. All right, negative outcomes from feminism. We're going to skip ahead a little bit, and then we're probably going to...
Problem solved.
Oh,
Fighters
wow.
got talented freelancers.
First
Anything
ad.
we need. Yeah.
My definition of bad have anything to do
Well, because
with what
I
your
think
definition of
throughout
bad
this
is?
entire debate, you have been advocating against the free will and the bodily autonomy
No,
of a
I went my
significant
whole
group of people.
my whole
I mean, you wanted,
view
hold on, pause. You
for-
want to disenfranchise voters.
my whole view
you
was
want to
already
disenfranchise
up
women,
for internal
you want to
critique,
disenfranchise-
and I gave you the entire internal critique of my argument of force doctrine for an hour and a half, and now it's my turn for the
It
internal
was not
critique.
an internal critique of the argument of force doctrine for an hour and a half. Let's calm down.
What do you know what time it is?
Yeah, it's about to be 5:45 around.
Yeah, so it was about an hour and a half. So here's the thing, right? When we get into feminism itself, if I can demonstrate to you that the outcomes of feminism have been bad, will you concede that it's bad? If I could.
If you can demonstrate that the outcome of feminism is bad,
Mm-hmm.
how would you, under the force doctrine, then that would be saying that to
Has
remove
nothing to do with my view.
No, let's
You're
pause
now
it.
under internal critique.
I'm saying that under the force doctrine, the only way to remove feminism would be through force. If we can both agree,
That's not the only way to remove feminism.
really, but I thought all power comes through force.
So
then
what?
how would you remove power from
The
women?
fundamental building blocks of power would still be there, but it would not be the only way to remove feminism.
So you believe that there are other ways to fundamentally have and consolidate power besides force?
Well, it's not just a matter of power, though, right? So,
But that is what
this
the
is
point of
this
feminism
is the
is
big
to
problem.
create
Is like you
equity
don't
and
even
power.
understand what's being said. But here's the thing. Back to this
Yes.
on feminism. Do you agree with me that feminism has not kept its promise of protecting women?
I think it's making progress. I think it's done better, but I don't think it's
Well,
complete.
how is it done better if we've had now about 150 years of feminism and women are in more dangerous situations they've ever been in the history of the United States?
Why do you believe women are in more dangerous situations now?
Well, I'm
than they
sorry.
were?
Do you agree with all of the RAINN statistics on sexual assault and all these various things?
Well, sexual assault statistically has increased, but again, the amount of reporting has also increased.
And so has STDs.
Before sexual
so
assault
has
was not.
so has STDs. So
Well, that
has
affects
so
men and women.
so have mental illness not as much as it does women, and
Okay,
not as
but I
much.
feel like
Hang on,
you're
not as much
conflating-
as mental. Hang on, I'm going to give you the laundry list.
Sure.
Mental illness is much higher in women. Single motherhood much higher in women. Right. Divorcee much higher. Right. All of the by every single conceivable.
Shay's world. Yeah, I mean, he's full of himself, but she doesn't have enough of a philosophical understanding to refute him right now. She was doing better at the beginning of the debate when they were talking about voting rights and stuff, but ever since they got into like force doctrine and outcomes of feminism, she's been kind of a mess.
Metric for negative outcome, you would have to concede that we've had nothing but negative outcomes from feminism.
But I
the
think you're
intact family
conflating-
home has been completely eliminated due to feminism.
That's not true.
Yes, it is true.
I
Why
think
are
you're conflating causation and correlation, though.
okay? I'm sorry. Is it feminists
How are you claiming
and
that
feminist organizations that push for no-fault divorce all over the United States?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but do you think that we
divorce
have
is
more
necessary.
or less intact families because of that?
Okay, but living in an unhappy home, like why should people be subject to live in
What about the positive outcomes for children? Like, even if it were the case that you didn't really like your husband, but your children had better outcomes if you stayed with him, shouldn't you?
Your children will not have better outcomes.
If they
to live
did,
in.
wouldn't you?
Statistically, they do. Statistically, they do have better outcomes if even unhappy parents stay together. but there are other issues that contribute to that. It's not, she doesn't know the refutations to any of this.
I personally would rather live in a family that is separated, but both of my
I know
parents
that's
are happy
great what
and
you would
healthy,
personally like to
then-
do, but if it were the case that
I think most children would, though. I mean, if you're in
if
an
it were the case though,
okay, but what if you're in an
if it were
abusive
the
home?
case though that you were to be in a relationship with a man, you didn't particularly like him, but you stayed together and your children had better results because you stayed together, right? Would you stay together with him? That's my question.
Yes, but what if you're
Yes.
forgetting about, but you're
Okay.
forgetting about abusive relationships. You're forgetting about a relationship in which one parent is an addict.
Nope, not
you're
forgetting.
forgetting about one parent in
So
a
here, we'll
relationship
go
in which a parent
over-
is a cheater.
Yeah, we'll go over
a
those
child
too.
would be significantly, it would be significantly more beneficial
I'll
to a
give you
child to be
the
removed
yeah.
from a
I'll
parent.
give you the stats there as well.
that is-
So as we dive into this, understand that cohabitation between men and women is what leads to mostly abuse, not marriage. The marriage rates of abuse are very low in comparison to cohabitation. Cohabitation is the standardization which you see with divorcees. That's where most of the abuse comes from. Where it doesn't come from usually is from the husband in the home.
But you're saying that cohabitation is leading to abuse and marriage is cohabitation.
No.
Yeah, no, he's separating those two things. Cohabitation would be like the new guy that moves in after your husband leaves. And that is statistically where the most abuse happens for children. The most abuse happens for children is if they enter the foster system. But
Cohabitation would be you're living with a man without being married to him.
Okay, so you think that they should marry, but like,
there's a case of her needing to learn more public speaking skills. I actually think that her public speaking is fantastic. She hasn't faltered ever in her projection or her confrontation. She's done a much better job of staying in the conversation than everyone else he debated this week. Like there was that Kylie Brewer girl who just completely fell apart like 60 seconds into the debate. And it was basically just like it was a complete disaster the entire time. I think her public speaking is great. She needs to take a couple like basic philosophy classes so that she understands, like, she's making the classic mistake of she has a conclusion which may or may not be correct, and she's worked her way backwards through the argument instead of starting with a foundation, like a philosophical foundation for an argument, and then working her way to the argument. So whenever Andrew, like, she'll start with the conclusion and Andrew will push her back and back and back until they get to the point where she didn't think that far back. And that's where they keep getting stuck, or well, where she keeps getting stuck. And Andrew, on the other hand, has a vast understanding of philosophy and epistemic foundations. So when you get all the way back on his, it always just falls back on the Christianity thing. And she doesn't know how to refute that because she doesn't have a counter understanding of philosophy that's strong enough to overcome Andrew's. It's super unfortunate, but her ability to do public speaking and be confrontational, I think, is on par with Andrew. It's just her understanding of and her ability to back up her conclusions with evidence and claims and stuff like that.
that would be having a child out of wedlock, which is
Yeah, you don't need to
Against
have
the
a
Christian
child
religion.
out of wedlock either.
Oh, I see. Wow, that's a very sound way to argue. I'm actually taking your thought. Oh, thank you very much, Shay's World. I appreciate it a lot.
Like these things are not mutually exclusive. So if it is the case, you have cohabitation, it leads to more abuse. The prescription for that, for the less negative outcome, would be marriage, right?
no, the prescription of that would be to separate those two people. If cohabitation of two partners who are not
Uh-huh.
married is leading to abuse, then why should those people then get married?
Yeah.
That
Okay.
doesn't make any sense.
Okay. No. The fact that they're
Oh, okay. So right now, Andrew's not talking about cohabitation that leads to marriage necessarily. Although statistically that is sort of not the best idea. But it's marginal. He's talking about post-marriage cohabitation with a different person, which is statistically extremely dangerous for children.
You're married, and the fact that when you're married, there's less abuse than when you cohabitate would point and indicate that cohabitation is a bad idea. Not that marriage is a bad idea.
No, I think it would point and indicate that couples who cohabitate without being married, it's better. Why should they get married? Why should you get married to someone who you cannot even cohabitate with?
Because abuse rates skyrocket when you cohabitate and are not married.
So those who are cohabitated in an abusive relationship, once they get married, you're claiming that
cohabitation
that abuse stops.
itself leads to more abuse.
Okay. So then why would the remedy of that be for those two people to get married?
Because oftentimes the cohabitation begins from divorce.
So you're saying that cohabitation, what the fuck does that even mean?
It means that post-divorce, women tend to cohabitate more, especially when they have kids. And it's the cohabitation with these people which leads to the abuse in their kids or the abuse of them.
So you're saying that they should stay in an unhappy relationship instead of leaving
Only
that
if we
relationship
care
to
about
cohabitate.
outcomes. And you said, if it is the case that I stayed with my man and the outcome for my kid was better, you should probably do that. So if it's the case that I can demonstrate for you that when women leave their husband, the abuse rates for them and their kids skyrocket for cohabitation.
But what about the outcome for that woman? What about the outcome for that man?
My turn.
I mean, that's a net negative for two adults versus a net negative for a child.
Here's what you said. You said specifically, if it is the case that I'm married and the results are better for my
Is her mom calling again? She's really got to tell her mom where she is.
kids.
Wait, one second.
1 second. You gonna filibuster the debate?
Calling me, hold on.
Why is your mom calling you in the middle of a debate?
I don't know. There we go.
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Now we're gonna
Okay, we're going to skip super chats again. Oh, okay, the silly pickle jar thing. I mean, I guess we can see who can open the jar. That's kind of boring. Return to cohabitation. There we go.
Be able to promote that women can also get a divorce as well as men, I don't think is advocating in favor of cohabitation, and both can be true. I don't think that those are mutually exclusive.
there's better topics to cover, I think.
Do you want
The problem with that is that
I actually agree with Brian. There's better topics to cover.
we're using your metric for what is bad. Under your metric for what is bad is the negative outcomes. There's negative outcomes with those relationships, therefore they are bad.
I already told you that I'm not an inherent consequentialist.
Yeah, I know, but every time I try to get a justification out of you, you just went back to negative outcomes. Otherwise, bad is bad is bad is bad is bad is bad
Okay,
is
but
bad.
you can't really quantify the net negative outcome of something that doesn't happen.
Actually,
or
I
doesn't
can
exist.
quantify the negative net outcome. I can look at what happens to the children who are abused. I can give you the stats from the NIS. I went over all of them yesterday, right here on this very program with a different feminist debater.
So then what you're arguing is against cohabitation, but not against the right to
Unless
get
it's
a divorce.
feminists who are doing everything they can in order to produce the outcomes for marriage and cohabitation.
I mean, I don't know who you're talking to, but I'm
You
not
don't know
doing
who I'm
everything I
talking
can
to?
produce the outcomes against.
Got
Like
it.
you can say that cohabitation is bad, but women still deserve a right to divorce a husband that is.
Okay, well, let's move on. We'll move on to the next one. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And we'll do the final internal critique for the debates done. What's the next topic, Brian? Or do you want me to bring one up?
You
Oh,
have
yeah.
something I mean, we could cover differentials when it comes to privilege, male privilege versus female privilege.
What's the question? What's the
Do you believe that do you
This is like Brian's favorite topic. He does this during the podcast all the time.
think male privilege exists?
Yeah, I mean, in a certain sense,
is
yes.
it greater than female privilege?
I think that we all have inherent privileges, and I think it's important to talk about intersectionality when we talk about privilege. Because,
Yeah, but
you
what's the question is asking specifically, do you think that
Andrew, you don't let me finish my
Yeah,
statement.
because-
You want me to finish the statement because you don't know where I'm going with it?
yes or no, do men have more privilege in society?
I think some men do, yes. But again, like I would think that a disabled man probably has less privilege than a able-bodied woman, depending on what his disability is.
If we were to take
That's a good answer. Maybe she can hold her own on this topic.
all women and put them collective as a group and all men collective as a group, would you say that men are more advantaged or have privileges over women, or that women are privileged and have advantages over men?
Yeah, I would say collectively, men probably have more privileges. than
Okay,
women.
so now we understand exactly what it is that we're arguing. So let
Yes.
me just start with this. What about the draft?
What about the draft?
So how is it that men are privileged over women when men can be drafted and women cannot?
Well, that would be an example of when women have a privilege over men. I don't think the draft should apply to anyone, though. To be
But
honest,
it
I
does
think the
apply
draft is,
to men,
I know,
right?
and I don't.
Yeah, the draft has to apply. And it has to be men. But that's fine. I would consider it a privilege to be among the group that is required to protect the country. That would be my counter argument.
I don't even think we should have a draft.
But
I think
we do
that
have
that
a
is
draft.
inherently immoral as well.
Yeah, but we do have a draft. We do, descriptively.
I know, and we should.
And how could it be that men, young men especially, can be drafted at the age of 18, 19, 20 years old, be sent to fight wars often on behalf of women who can vote them into those wars, right? How is that a privilege that men have? And what is the, if you had to pick anything that you could point to for women that is on par with that duty that men have, I want to hear what it is.
I would say probably the societal role of the traditional wife and the inability for certain women, or the promotion of an idea that women should not be allowed to work.
Who promotes that women should not be allowed to work?
You do.
Oh, nope. She doesn't know Andrew's argument on this one. All right, well, she's going to learn it.
No, I don't.
So you think that women should be allowed to work?
Women have always been able to work.
And you think that outside of the home?
Yeah, of course they've always been able to work outside the home.
Hey, that's great.
What does that have to do with anything?
I mean, part of the whole manosphere and like the promotion of these social norms and social roles.
That's where you're wrong.
So yeah. Oh boy. She has some preconceived notions based on like probably like clips that she's seen. But there's no part of the manosphere that thinks that women shouldn't be allowed to work. There are areas that think women should be encouraged to certain fields. There are areas that think women should maybe postpone working to focus more on the childbearing aspect during those years where it's easier to do that, and then get back to work later in life. There are a lot of different thoughts here. I don't think anyone is saying that women shouldn't have the right to work at all. I don't think that's... I've never seen that when I dig into the actual, like, the context of, like, maybe some little clips that she's seen that kind of make it seem like that. So, yeah, we'll
You
see.
see,
Really?
Actually, you have the more misogynistic view.
No, but I'm against
You have the more
that.
misogynistic view. The truth is that what the manosphere would say is that a lot of them say, no, those women need to fucking work, otherwise they're in a position of privilege being at home. So let me ask you this. Are women in a position
What
of privilege?
manosphere podcaster is saying
Oh, you
that?
hear them say it all the time. Are women in a position
Really?
of privilege?
Candace Owens
Hang
isn't
on,
saying
stop,
that.
stop.
Myron Gaines isn't saying that.
Stop. Yeah, they do. But here's
Andrew
the
Tate is
thing.
not saying
I'll
that.
demonstrate it for
None
you.
of them are
Are
saying
women
that.
in a position of privilege when they're stay-at-home moms?
No.
Are they in a position of privilege when they're working?
Unless I mean, I think that they're in a position of equality or equity. That's the goal.
But so then that would mean, by that logic, they're oppressed by being stay-at-home moms.
I think that if they are not using their free will to decide whether or not they're a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, they're a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
Are they privileged or not privileged? Is it a privilege to be a stay-at-home mom, or is it not a privilege to be a stay-at-home mom? Or is it a privilege for women to work, or is it not a privilege to work?
I think it depends circumstantially. If a stay-at-home mom is choosing and has her free will to be a stay-at-home mom, and that is an
Yeah.
arrangement that she made with her husband, who would also like to do that, then it can be, yes. But if a woman does not have the right to make that choice, and if you are, proposing a society in which we follow strict gender rules and societal rules in which
Yeah, but
only women can-
gender norms show women always working, always having worked.
Yes.
The idea is gender norms, what they don't show is that it's a good idea for women to take their reproductive years and work outside of the home. That's stupid. That
No,
makes
it's
no
not.
sense. Yes, of course.
How do you establish yourself in a career if you like actively have a child at home?
You establish yourself in a career after your childbearing years, like everybody else
So
would.
you have to start work at like 40?
Versus having children at 40?
But you don't have. You can do both though. You can
but
have
here's
children.
the thing.
You can do both. I don't know if she's going to be able to make this argument properly, but you can make this argument. It's very possible.
Hey, this
And
is what's so funny.
establish a career.
Do you think then that if you moms split their attention between their children and their career, that their children are going to get as much attention as they would if the mom didn't have a career?
But why should a mother not have the ability to have a career
For
if
their
she-
children.
Well, then just don't have children. if you
They
don't
would
want
do
them.
right, exactly. This is my point though, right? It's like, so why
Dude,
wouldn't
but
you
women make up 47% of the labor force. Literally millions of women
Yeah.
do this every day.
Yeah, and you know what happens? Our birth rate, do you know what it's at?
It's a lot lower, significantly.
Why?
Because women are having kids older. But that's free will. You can't just usurp someone's right to have free will
do you
because their
think-
job is to have a
So
baby.
let me ask you, is it a negative thing that the birth rate is declining to the point where we can't even sustain our population?
Well, we could if we'd allow immigrants to come in. But
Wait. So you want to replace the population?
no, I'm not a replacement theorist. But at
You
the
want to
same
replace
time,
the population?
Can we go back?
No.
to-
Can you answer the question? If it is the case that our population's massively decreasing, which you just conceded it is, because women are having children older, which you just conceded they are,
Sure.
and you say that's a good thing,
I'm not.
and
saying
then
that's
say it wouldn't, it
We can fix the birth rate without forcing women to stay in the home. These things are not mutually exclusive. There are other issues that contribute much more heavily to falling birth rates than women going to work. It's coinciding but separate attitudes that are causing this. But I don't think she knows how to argue this.
wouldn't go down if we had immigrants come in. How is that not replacing the population?
I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I don't understand what your solution is. Should women not be allowed to work until
It's
after
your
they've had
internal
children?
critique time now. Tell me
Should
real quick.
women not be allowed to
Tell
work
me real quick.
until they've had
Well,
children?
Why are you asking me questions instead of answering them now? It's my turn to ask the question. So
Why is that? Who
because
said
you
that?
just
We're having an open discussion.
you just internally critiqued and I allowed you for over an hour at least my position, my turn. So real quick, can you
sure.
tell me why it is that when you get to the point where you cannot replace your own population and you say, well, we wouldn't have a problem with that if we opened it up to immigrants, how is that not you advocating for replacement?
I'm not advocating for complete replacement. I'm not saying people should just stop working and stop having children and it should be entirely up to immigrants. But I mean, if we did have more channels for immigrants to come into this country legally, you know, we might
Would
not be so
that
worried about the
replace the
population.
domestic population?
What's the problem with doing that, though?
What, don't.
I mean,
would
are we
it,
not all humans?
Would it replace the domestic population?
It wouldn't completely replace it.
Would it mostly replace it?
It would add. Why is it replace? It's adding. It's
Because if the
addition.
people who are okay, let me ask you this: is it a good thing that Native Americans don't have a lot of kids?
Why aren't they having kids?
Well, is it a good thing that they are or are not? Would you rather see Native Americans having more kids?
I mean, I don't.
Like, why is it a bad thing that we came over here and took land from the Native Americans and replaced their population? Why is that bad?
Well, because we killed millions of people and caused
no,
significant
well,
amounts
no,
of
no.
suffering.
Actually,
it was human suffering. It was a genocide.
Actually, most
I mean,
of
what
most
do you-
hang on,
like,
most of
what do
what
you mean,
killed
why is
most
genocide
of
bad?
most of what killed Native Americans was not genocide; it was disease.
The Trail of Tears killed millions of people.
Okay, that actually no, the trail.
Couple handfuls of thousands, maybe. There weren't even millions of people there, I don't think.
Trail of Tears didn't kill millions of people.
Yes, it did.
How many millions do you think died in the Trail of Tears?
Let's Google it.
Google it.
All right.
Oh boy.
How many millions died at the Trail of Tears?
It says an estimated 4,000 out of 16,000 Cherokee people, or wait, forced to relocate. Let me see deaths.
How many millions?
Yeah, you can't kill millions of people out of 16,000. That'd be called math.
It says estimate that 6,000 men, women, and children die on the 1,200-mile march called the Trail of Tears, Cherokee.
Okay.
So is 6,000
That's still bad. That's still a lot of people, and it was still horrible. But millions isn't 6,000.
anywhere close to million?
Andrew's doing the thing right now, by the way. I just want to point out, Andrew's doing the thing that he always makes fun of Destiny for doing, where they stick their head in their hands and they're like, just wanted to point that out.
So let's just look at
And
colonization.
millions.
How many Native American people were killed from colonization? Can you Google that one for me?
Yeah, disease.
How
No,
many
no,
Native
no.
Amer-
How many
no,
were
no,
killed by
no.
disease?
How many Native
Millions.
Americans killed by?
Colonization. It's a millions of people.
No, disease killed them. Disease killed the overwhelming amount of
You
Native
know that
Americans.
we used chemical warfare, or not we.
Oh, we did, huh?
Yes.
So we didn't understand anything about how diseases worked, but we were able to use diseases for chemical warfare, huh?
What do you mean we?
Not knowing about how they worked doesn't mean that we couldn't have still used them. We may have had a different understanding about what we were doing, but those are not mutually exclusive things.
We didn't understand how
Would
disease
you
worked.
When do
I
you
never said
think?
that.
When do you think we understood the disease process?
You know that smallpox blankets that were infected with smallpox,
Total
were
myth.
given and gifted to. No,
How-
it's not.
how- do
No,
you-
the fuck it's not.
Okay,
Bullshit,
let me ask you a
Andrew. That's not a
question.
myth.
You get sick,
Yeah.
and you don't understand how the disease process works.
All right, we're skipping the rest of the colonization history lesson because it's sort of just like a total tangent.
College? Do you think women should?
I would just advocate for a national campaign which asks women to keep the traditional family intact because it's going to lead to the most amount of children, and to defer those college age years, just like we did a national campaign to try to move women into college. I would do a national campaign to say defer those years for childbearing, and you can always go to college later after your kids are grown, or you can do it from
Oh,
home.
that's not fun. That's not the point of college. Did you go to college?
The point of college is to go fuck?
No.
What's the point?
The point of college is to learn while you are young so that you can gain skills that help you in the workforce and develop a career over time. It takes time to develop a
Yeah, that doesn't really refute his point because you can do that from home.
career.
You
can't
can
just do that
develop.
whenever.
You can develop the. First of all, most of the people are getting degrees. By the way, they ain't using those fucking degrees in any of those fields, are they? What's your degree going to be in? What's it going to be in?
Fucking your mom. No, I'm joking. Film production.
And do you think that you're going to end up a film
Jesus.
producer?
Hopefully, that's
Yeah,
the goal.
but I mean, do you think that the chances that most people have a degree in film production are producing film?
I mean, I happen to go to the best film school in the country, but you know,
Yeah,
I'm
and
sure
just
a lot
like
of
I
people
just
aren't.
had a woman I
But-
talked to yesterday who got a degree in comedy writing.
Oh well, sorry.
Yeah, or psychology or sociology. These fields are completely oversaturated.
But these skills are still useful, and we also know that.
Oversaturated.
But we also know that people, on average, who get a college degree, the median income for those people is higher.
Yeah, but guess what? The negative effects mentally much higher than if they don't have children. They're college educated.
So your plan is to usurp people's free will.
How are
on
you
their
usurping it by
behalf.
having a campaign just asking people to defer?
Okay, and then if they choose not to do that, what
They
happens?
can choose, but
Okay.
here's the thing: it was extraordinarily.
that. Have fun.
It was extraordinarily effective to have the propaganda which said that women should be going to college. If you look at the college rates pre the propaganda, post it, right? You can see that it had a great effect. You could have the same type of effect which asked women to defer that for childbearing years because they're happier, more well-adjusted, and guess what you would be promoting then? The old school gender roles.
Women fought an entire, I mean, not fought physically, but women had many movements on the basis of demanding the right to choose whether or not they go to college and when. Why would we do that if we didn't
First
want
of all-
Are you saying that the feminist revolution is
No,
a propaganda
first of all,
movement?
when it came to college, it
I
was
mean,
real.
there's currently more women in college
When
than
it
men.
came
if
to
we
college,
didn't want to be here,
so when
why
it
would
came
we
to
be?
college, there was very few. There was these Ivy League colleges. There was very few colleges ever, and most men never went to college either. That's the truth. Almost nobody ever went to college. It was about the best and the brightest. And what's happened is we've lowered the deviated standards so anybody can fucking go to college. Now it's become a requirement for an entry-level job to go to college, which is insane.
But that's an issue with capitalism. That's
It's
not an issue.
I tend to agree with Andrew on these points surrounding college. Historically, he's correct. That is how the trend went. And now we like literally propagandize kids throughout all of elementary, middle, and high school to think that you have to go to college and you don't really have to go to college to make an income and have a career and all that. There are a lot of outcomes, or there are a lot of alternatives that would lead to better outcomes for a lot of people. And yeah, it's kind of a mess. The whole thing is kind of a mess right now. We're kind of in a mess right now.
Issue with
Feminism?
capitalism.
Yes,
It's
it
an
is.
issue with
Hold
stupid
on just
feminist
one moment.
propaganda.
It's not feminist
Just a moment.
propaganda.
Just a moment. I need to do a quick sidebar with both of you really quick. So viewers, we're going to take a 20-30 second intermission. Just stay tuned. Hold on for just a moment.
What do we do?
Okay, we're going to skip ahead to the closing statements, and then it looks like they do a bunch of other random stuff after, but we're not gonna do that because this has been long enough.
I think my goal societally is to advance us towards a mutually beneficial society. And I think that a lot of the arguments made are not only negative towards men, but women as well. So socially, and I think that there are three negative impacts of kind of hating on the goal of equality, and they're social, economic, and political. So socially, it's fair to state that people are generally happier when they have free will, and that it is, although we cannot agree on a definition of free will, it is inherently better to have a society in which all of us have a basic capacity for will over their body and bodily autonomy. I think that a lot of we didn't really talk that much about feminism, if I'm being honest. My closing statement is mostly about that. But I guess what I'll say is that everyone deserves the right to free will without judgment, and that goes for men as well as women. I think that a lot of the idea that men have to maintain force over others, and that if they don't do that, they are emasculating themselves, is inherently stifling to young men. I think it's negative to young men. I think it encourages aggression against each other and against women, and I would argue that the equal force doctrine is inherently immoral. It is immoral to police and dictate society exclusively on the basis of force. If that was the case, then all of our presidents would be the president because they won a.
He's sticking his head into the microphone because that's not even kind of the claim that he made in regards to force doctrine. She didn't understand any part of that hour of the debate at all.
An arm wrestle. I think economically, women do make up 47% of the labor force. Like it or not, women add trillions of dollars to the GDP alongside men every year. If we were to have women just step away from working and exclusively run the household, we would be economically handicapping our own society. And in terms of men, the wage stagnation for the middle class, which we didn't even get into, there's been incredible amounts of wage stagnation for middle class and lower income workers. According to Pew Research, after adjusting for inflation, middle class and lower income workers are making about the same now as they did in 1978. They have the same spending power. However, the cost of housing and living has gone up dramatically. From 1970, the median home price was $23,000, which, accounting for inflation, is about $180,000 to today. And in 2025, the median home price in Q1 of this year was $416,000. So it's almost 3 times as high as it was in 1978. So the average cost of raising a child is around $21,000 a year in the U.S. Of course, that depends on where you are, but that's the national average. I think it is entirely up to men to put and it puts the burden entirely on men to financially compensate for their household. You know, you're kind of disenfranchising them on a level as well. I think the economic standard you're trying to hold men to is impossible and unfair, and I don't think that you've had to live it because you're not the age of most men who are starting a family and who are starting work and who are starting to carry the financial burden of a society in which they are the sole providers for their household. And then again, money is power. And if women don't have the ability to make money, then they don't have the power to dictate what they do with themselves. And they don't have the power to get basic resources for their children, like food and water and lights and housing. And then politically, I think this one got kind of messy because Andrew doesn't seem to believe in basic representation for either men or women, but I believe in a representative government. I think that it is fundamentally illogical and practically impossible to create a government that is not based on the representation of all people. I just think that's immoral. And maybe I can't answer why that is, but I think a lot of people agree that they would like the right to vote. And just because you are stupid does not deny you the right to vote. But despite being slightly more than half of the US population, women have yet to make up 30% of the government. In history, the total number of female Supreme Court justices is 6 out of 116. That's like 5%. And I just don't think you can claim to have a representative democracy if it has never accurately represented the population. But it doesn't sound like Andrew wants a representative democracy anyway, so I guess that's besides the point. But in closing, I think that it's important to note that you literally cannot have a society of men or only women. We actively just have to work together. There's nothing we can do to avoid having to live and work together. And I think that by thank you. Oh, you're talking.
You're good.
Sorry, how much time do I have left?
Andrew will give his closing statement, so you can take your time, though, to finish up.
Yeah, but anyway, I think that enforcing stringent gender norms, and I think that enforcing strict gender roles, and I think that encouraging people to fall into those roles if that's not how they would like to exercise their free will is inherently immoral. I do. It fundamentally is. To force people to do things that they do not want to do is an immoral act. And it hurts both men and women because we fundamentally cannot exist without each other. We are the same species, and I don't know. We just gotta make it work.
All good?
Yep.
Okay.
My nose is itchy.
Did you hear? You want to just check your phone, see if you heard?
There were a couple of points in there. They weren't like coherent though. Like that was a good point about the financial aspect. But she's not able to tie all of her ideas together because some of them just fundamentally counter each other. It's unfortunate.
From him.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew, would you like to give your closing statement?
Yeah, so my opponent, this debate was particularly annoying because she just literally has no idea what she's talking about. She contradicted herself multiple times. She conceded the Force Doctrine. She said that there was millions of people who died on the Trail of Tears, just to name a few crazy ass things that she said. When she did a question-begging fallacy, which then moved on into another contradiction when we went into what actually even makes a thing bad. She couldn't decide on what even her ethical purview was, in which she was holding feminism to the standard of an ethical purview. We couldn't even get past a lot of that. So then we move into feminism itself. She ends up conceding to most of my points there as well. She says that if the Japanese, if their birth rate went down, that would be bad by her standard. If white people, wouldn't be bad. But then she contradicted that as well. It was just one contradiction after another. In fact, I would say, out of all the opponents I've ever had, this particular one contradicted herself more than maybe any other I've ever dealt with. When I go back through it and we clip it up, I got a feeling that it's just going to be like 800 contradictions. The other thing to focus on, too, is that she conceded altogether Force Doctrine. She ended up at the very end explaining that she not only agreed that it's descriptively true, but that men have no obligation whatsoever to utilize force on behalf of women. There's no moral ought for them to do that, which is exactly what Force Doctrine dictates. So she made a complete concession on that as well. She says that hating on equality is stupid, but we started to kind of dive into this. We weren't able to get to it, but a bit on college when she conceded the point that the standards have been lowered to the point where now a degree is necessary to get a job. You can see this with DEI across the board. It's not an empowerment of anybody. It's a lowering of standards, which hurts everybody. And that's actually what's been going on in society for a long time, is the lowering of standards. That includes with college, right? She concedes that most of the population is stupid. That was what she said. She said, you're right. Most people are stupid. Yet, I don't think she would say most women who go to college are stupid, which is interesting, isn't it, right? Most population is stupid. Most women who go to college are not. But if you agree that most of the population is stupid, then you would probably have to concede that most of the population who goes to college is also stupid, which means the standards have been lowered there so that they can pass college, right? She says 47% of the labor force are women, and then she acts like that's a choice, right? She's like, no, women are empowered because they have the choice to do that. It's like, no, they don't actually have the choice to be stay-at-home moms in two-income economy anymore, and that is taking choice away from women. That's not empowering anybody. And if you look at the mental health crisis of women, it's almost always related to their obligations at work and family, where if they could just focus on one or the other, those mental health issues tend to deteriorate. So on basically every single point my opponent lost. It was wild to see, but she mostly lost because I was willing to stand up to the internal critique of my view of force doctrine and still got the concession out of her on what force doctrine was and the application of it. And then on top of that, every subsequent point, I basically got a concession out of. So I don't really know how much more I could have won this particular debate, but I do appreciate having it.
You want to keep going?
Did you hear back from?
No, I didn't, but let's just do it.
All right, we're not going to keep going. That was... It happened. She started off strongish. She had some pretty decent refutations to Andrew's ideas about voting. She didn't use the strongest refutation, which was disappointing. The strongest refutation to limiting the vote is that the more people you limit from voting, the more likelihood there is that those people will feel disenfranchised and turn to violent revolution because they don't feel like they have any say over what's going on. This is why when we had kings and there was no type of democracy or representation at all, you ended up with violent revolution. Since we've had democracy, we've really had one revolution, kind of. It would be the Civil War. It's the only really large-scale violent conflict that's happened within the United States. And that really didn't have anything to do with like a certain group of the population disagreeing with the government. That was more of a states' rights versus federal rights thing that turned into a slavery thing. And I mean, we all know the history of the Civil War. When we got into force doctrine and the rest of it, she completely fell apart. It was sad to see. She is reasonably well spoken as far as like public speaking goes. She stayed in the conversation a lot more than most of the other people he debated this week. The other ones were really bad. They didn't have any refutations for anything. It was just like a mess. But yeah, that's gonna do it for tonight. You want more of my thoughts? I gave them throughout the debate. And thank you for everyone who hung out. We had a pretty big chat today. We had a good amount of concurrent viewers for a week-old channel. And I want to thank you all for